Sup, everybody? This is KARAK with ACG. What follows is a detailed interview with Joshua Davidson and Brandon Mueller from Gearbox. We talk about audio, everything that is included in the creation of audio for video games. You guys know this is a huge deal to me, so I implore that you sit down and just watch a little bit of it. We get to talk about games. We go off the beaten path a little bit, but back onto it, and just talk about their experiences, what they use, the tools that they use, and their general love for video games and audio in video games, which I think is incredibly important. Important enough that this is going on to YouTube as well as Spotify and all of the other places where the audio part of the podcast will go. But I wanted to put this on YouTube to give them a shout out. I've known Joshua for ages, and he's always been one of the people who really does champion the coverage of video game audio, whether it be music, whether it be sound effects, whether it be environmentals. And be able to meet him, sit down, talk about this, as well as Brandon, has been an absolute pleasure of mine. So again, what follows is a detailed discussion about video game audio. What's up, everybody? This is KARAK with ACG, and I'm here with Johnny, the notorious Big J. Thank you for showing up, Johnny. I appreciate it. As well as Joshua Davidson and Brandon Mueller for a podcast about music, sound, maybe some discussion about their work on Borderlands and Wonderlands, those kind of things. We're gonna just sit back. We're gonna talk about games. We are gonna talk about current events as well. Shout out to Batman's voice actor who passed away today. Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
And you know who else passed away today? Gallagher.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, Gallagher. I just saw that right before the podcast.
Dude, 2022 is a bitch. It won't let up. It won't let. I mean, the amount of awesome people who've died in 2022 has shocked me. Johnny went blurry.
Completely
blurry just to show respect. Johnny's like, dude, we should all go blurry just for respect. But these guys are awesome. I've had Josh on already once or twice, as well as it was Brian. I think we had
Brian was with me last time.
Yeah, Ghostbusters Brian. And
it was the before times.
Yeah, it was the before times. And we got to talk about game audio, which is something big to me. Also, we've had some awesome titles here with incredible audio here recently, and it's always cool to get everybody together, talk about how they do their stuff and they do their work. But before we start all that, I want to say thank you to our sponsors for this podcast. And that silence is for no sponsors. We never do sponsors. You guys who are doing the patron, you are technically the sponsors for the podcast. So imagine some really cool ad read right there of whatever you want. Hemorrhoid cream. Imagine a really good hemorrhoid cream
be a
ad
tough
read.
one.
Not for me. Not for me. I've got a fake ad for a hemorrhoid cream, Johnny. Did we ever? I don't think we recorded it because I think I needed you guys to help me.
Anybody? I feel like you need to call out at least a good one if you're going to do it.
Yeah, that's true. You don't want to sell a bad hemorrhoid cream, right? By the time you're looking for it, you want something good. So first of all, let's talk about. I do want to give some people some idea of how long you guys have been there. So Josh, how long have you been in audio overall, and then how long have you been there working? Where you currently are.
Yeah, sure. I started at Volition Incorporated in 2007, and I worked there for 2 years on Saints Row 2 and Red Faction Guerrilla. And in 2009, I moved to Gearbox and started working on Borderlands 1. Basically, I came in at the tail end of development, 2 or 3 months before it came out, and started immediately working on DLCs after that. And then I've been at Gearbox for 13 years now and 15 years in the industry altogether.
13 years and 15 years. Dude, you have to be one of the longer term employees at a company. It feels like people move around more than that. Is audio?
Yeah, people do.
Okay.
Yeah, well, people do move around a lot. People have been moving around a lot more since the pandemic with the remote environment.
Right.
Because usually, in the before times, you would have to move from across state lines and everything. So it was a much bigger decision. And now, with all the consolidation happening in the industry and with all the remote work incentives and everything like that, there's a lot more competition for, developers trying to not snipe employees, but attract employees.
Yeah, right.
So there's been a lot of people moving around since the pandemic. Yeah, and I think it's for the better for sure.
Yeah, mix it up a little bit. Brandon, what about you?
Yeah, so Gearbox is actually the first AAA studio I've ever worked at. I got hired a few years back during the pandemic. Previous to that, I was working at a AA developer known as Frostkeep Studios, which unfortunately shut down. But previous to that, I went to film school actually, and learned audio engineering and Foley work, and was doing electronic music on the side. So I kind of got into sound design that way. And then one day I was taking courses at a studio in Richmond where I went to school. And my professor, the engineer there, was talking about how they did some of the vocal work for Bethesda and Ubisoft. And he was like, you should try game audio. And I was like, really? That's so interesting. And yeah, so I just kind of taught myself audio, like why is like our middleware, Unreal, how to do sound design over the course of a number of years. And yeah, I'm here now. So
yeah, you guys, sometimes you'll hear stories like Johnny or whatever, where you like games, so then you become a YouTuber or whatever, and it sort of works out. But I find like musicians, whenever I talk to them, or any sound designers for video games, Austin Wintory is the same way. Whenever I talk to them, they get in some odd ways. Like somebody bumps into him, Elijah Chuck, who did Dead Rising 4, but he's more of Horizon Forbidden West is his big one now. But I met him from Dead Rising 4. And he hadn't done other games. He had done Canadian TV shows. Like, it was all Canadian TV shows. And I was like, well, that's odd. How the hell do you, like, how does that even happen? And I'm pretty sure one of the development teams was in Canada for Dead Rising, which is how it's one of those things where it's just like everybody filtering in. It's very cool. So how long have you been doing it, Brandon? What year did you, like, officially start? 2020?
2020, yeah.
2020,
so right around,
so 2 years.
Yeah, right around the time when everyone had kind of figured out like how the pandemic was being around for a while, and companies kind of had to pivot out of panic mode and back into like, oh, we can kind of we have to pivot to like work from home or whatever. But yeah, I got hired around that time when they were deciding to hire folks again. And yeah, 2020-ish.
Well, it's a good timing for the Foley work thing, because I want to ask you guys something. So I don't know if you guys have like a favorite sound in a video game. I do. Like, I know some people talked about Final Fantasy menu sounds. Like when they go through the menu, there's people who are like, that's like their saccharin. They're like, oh. But I got to tell you, I think the best sound I've heard in 2022, and this is not a joke, is the sarcophagus / coffin scraping sound of Kratos moving the top of a coffin aside or a chest aside to get his one little pouch. By the way, worst RNG ever. You never would want that guy in your D&D team, because he's got the worst RNG. Opens up a giant thing, thousands of jewels, rolls a one
every time.
Every time. He pulls out a horn, and you're like, dude, that's the 40th fucking horn you've got. Like, at some point, let somebody else open it. But the sound work in that, the grit, you can hear stuff hitting like the mic or hit, they've obviously put something down. You can hear like the grit at the very end. Can you guys walk me through, like, if I was working with you guys and I was like, I want to make this thing sound like an ancient Egyptian tomb cracking open. How many different levels and layers are there to one sound? Let's just say it's a 5-second sound. Guy putting his hands on it, scraping it, and then the stop and whatever that trailing sound is. Like, I think here I've picked up, like I said, sand or almost like salt on linoleum. If you've ever done that in a quiet room, you can still hear it if you have good ears. How would you guys put that together? And when you are putting it together, I'm always surprised with Foley work, because they'll use stuff that you don't expect. Like, you always hear the stories about watermelons for heads smashed in or whatever those may be. And either one of you guys can go. What would you do? Like, or what do you pick out when you hear those? Is there anything special about making that kind of sound sample?
Yeah, Foley is one of those things that, like the more the like industry of game audio develops, the more compartmentalized the specialties become, essentially. So Foley is one of those things where it's very adjacent to sound design, but it's not sound design exactly. Like so something like that would be like, you would have a room full of props, and you would just go around the room and find something that would work. Big Foley studios typically are just like, they're a bit like big
playgrounds for adults.
Yeah, it's like like a hoarding of everything that you could possibly hoard, like, and you just go, and we have a live room at up here in Frisco, Texas, where we have a bunch of props in it, and we would typically go, if we're designing for something very, very literal, that's pretty much Foley. That's like your hand, moving across the concrete.
Mm-hmm.
That's footsteps, that's cloth, that's jingling, that's Foley. It's like very, very literal. And typically Foley is not extremely layered,
Oh,
because
okay,
it's
gotcha.
it's very literal. But
Okay.
some Foley is going to be, because like the movement of Kratos isn't going to be just one layer. It's going to be some jingling. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
cloth. It's going to be his footsteps. So it's multiple layers that have been recorded as a very literal performance. But sound design, like, would be, you know his axe throwing, it's the monsters and things like that, the very heavily creatively designed things that do require tons of layers. And that does include live recordings and stuff. But with like the opening the sarcophagus thing, I would say that, like, that's like a mixture of like live recording and designing, because if you go really literal with like something like that, say the sarcophagus a is like a loot box almost, or like something that would
Yeah.
contain treasure, you want to pump it up with a mixture of live recordings and heavy processing to kind of make it feel more rewarding to the player.
Right.
Something that's
Ear
like,
candy.
so yeah, it's ear candy. It rips it open. You hear the cracks and crunches of it. There might be wood breaking, or twigs breaking. There might be concrete elements and things like that.
Hmm.
So that's a mixture of like things that you record. It's not just like one thing. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you maybe one day we recorded this one concrete scrape and then it'll work there. And then maybe, oh, we got some twigs, some twigs breaking or something in our library. I'll add that layer into it, and if you record it at a really high sample rate, you have the opportunity to pitch things down without losing clarity. So it makes it sound bigger. So you can go that way. But yeah.
By
Anything
the
to add
way,
to
I
that,
want to
Brandon?
insert
Oh, go ahead.
in
Go ahead.
here.
Go ahead,
So
John.
it's real quick, because you mentioned the, kind of the ear candy aspect. And when you talk about what's the most satisfying loot opening experience, it's always been Borderlands for me. I always go back to, opening that toilet, that it just that flashy sound. I don't know who
Yeah.
did that, but it's excellent, right? And then like all the different types that have their own like contraptions that open up and different things. Like the sound of it is so tuned to be like, what would you say? What's the term when you get that chemical,
The dopamine
Dopamine.
hit.
the
Yeah,
dopamine, the boost, right? So you're like, whoa, loot, and the way it also explodes visually. So I thought that always worked super well.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Brandon?
Yeah, we really try to lean into that sort of thing when we were designing. For instance, in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, we did when I was designing. I designed the main like treasure chesty looking loot crate that you'll find like ammo and occasionally health in.
Right.
And I spent like, God, I don't know how many hours I spent on like trying to make sure that like had like all the ear candy and whatnot that just felt like satisfying every time. So it is like a bunch of Foley recording, but then you have to kind of layer it together and process it really interesting ways, possibly using effects and whatnot to get that dopamine hit. But obviously with something that's like smaller, like that sort of crate, you don't want it to feel as rewarding as, say, like a gigantic chest where you get like,
Right.
I don't know, a purple or a legendary. So finding that balance is usually the more difficult part.
Yeah, and there's often like a rhythmic cadence to it that's almost somewhat musical in some ways, that if you have like, if there's dynamics where it kind of like swells up and down a little bit, like, and
Yeah.
you hear that if you get that kind of
Yeah.
effect, it's sort of musical in a way, even though it's not music.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned sound samples, and one of the things that's bummed me out big time was Valhalla. I don't know if you guys have tracked all the problems that they had with the Valhalla issue, but
I actually I kind of defended them on our Reddit thread one time a little bit, because it's there's a lot of technical jargon, but like there's just so many sounds they had to downsample so many things to fit into memory. And,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, that is the thing, is the memory. There have been people who did a really good job breaking out, the size of it if they had recorded it at proper rates and all that. And then obviously we know with Odyssey and Origins it had the same issue. It's just it wasn't every single sound, or it wasn't like as many. And I know that a lot of people don't care about sound, because I still have friends who are like, yeah, playing on a mono TV speaker or whatever. And I'm like, dude, just never talk to me again. I'm playing on like Neura headphones, or some like super expensive headphones, and they're playing on their mono, or they got the audio down. They're listening to me on a podcast, so I can't bitch too much. But I'm still like, come on, man. But you do get these times where, especially when it comes to audio now, I'm really happy to see audio taking a step forward, and it seems it's one of the reasons why we've talked multiple times, Josh. But it's cool to see it taking a step forward, but at the same time, it's a little bit like pixel counters, where it becomes this thing where I think opinion is very hard to put your foot down, and it requires you to know what you're talking about, and it requires you to understand that you might make mistakes, blah, blah, blah. Pixel counting came in for games, and it's like a person who doesn't like a game can just say it runs at 29.5 frames per second, therefore it sucks. It's a little easier for a person to get away with that kind of stuff. And the same thing happens with audio. Valhalla still worked out. I still enjoy playing it. But it's got enough issues, and those issues have been classified, categorized, easily referenced, so that as we move forward and people are more knowledgeable, they can like point at it and be like, that's why I don't like Valhalla, versus maybe, for me, I had other issues with Valhalla, but that was one of them. But I could still enjoy it, and that's the only thing I dislike, is the more the people who are not necessarily that instant flashbang that people get in games. That looks awesome. First thing you see on every YouTube when a game looks good, that looks awesome. But then once you start talking about sound or voice even, and I've dinged on some guys where I know they're recording voices at their desk, like on a wooden desk, because I can hear it.
You can hear the wood resonance.
Alakine's Gun is one of those titles where I'm like, dude, I could tell you, I set up cubicles for 10 years. I was an office manager. I can tell you what cubicle they chose because I know the tonal sound of that cubicle. I know the material. But at the same time, then it becomes all about that, right? And it's almost easier for people to ding on it, so it's this big positive where people like you guys can get, people start talking about Wise and start talking about, all these different programs. People start knowing it's easier to maybe even understand the business to where to get in, which is awesome. But then at the same time, if there is an issue, boy, you hear about it. Like, like it's rough, man. It's rough. I wouldn't want to be you guys. I wouldn't, and not just you guys. I mean, just developers. I've talked about it before. I'm like, damn, son. If there's, you get lumped in, president of a company makes a bad decision, suddenly the line, some poor dude working on the texture for an Arrowhead, is getting emails, and you're like, seriously? Is that who we want to, is that who we want to complain to? When it comes to positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and stuff like that, I've always wondered, do you guys hear it inside the company like you hear it from gamers? And this popped up a couple weeks ago when I was talking to another audio guy, and I was like, well, I like the sound of this gun. It was an AK-47. Obviously, they had rattles going. AK-47 always sounds like it's just one step away from exploding in your hands. Like, that's the best kind of AK-47 because that's what they're made of. And you hear all these rattles and you hear that looseness. And then I was like, wait a minute. When you're making this inside, does anybody tell you that? And he didn't really have a great answer for that. Or his answer would be, he didn't hear a lot of that. It would usually be like, okay, these sound good. Do you guys ever have like a time? Are you guys sitting at each other's desk and like desk commanding, and somebody's like, "Dude, that sounds awesome." Like I've never asked you that. How do you guys get feedback for good audio design on something, whatever it may be?
That's actually changed a good bit over time throughout I mean, in the before times we would be at the facility, and now we're pretty much fully remote, but we still have the facility there.
I was not aware of the fully remote part. Okay, gotcha.
So we've had to shift that a little bit. And now we have more people as well. We've hired a number of new audio staff since 2020, quite a bit. We've more than doubled the size of the department easily. But now it's a lot of it, for better and for worse, occurs in Teams chats.
Okay.
And we which is good. We can just post up a file of something we're working on and get feedback. But you do lose something. You do lose like you said, the standing over your shoulder kind of moments.
Camaraderie almost.
That kind of camaraderie. You have to kind of like, we've been slowly trying to figure out how to like get better at that. I think we're getting better every day. But now also we have a lot more staff. It used to be a lot easier because there were like 2 or 3 sound designers,
Right.
and that was it. And but now it's like, okay, well, we need to figure out how to make sure we increase visibility in a healthy way, and I think that's just reinforcing the culture. You need to make sure that people feel psychologically safe to share their work, because it's sharing your work is hard. It never gets easier, like I've been making music since I was a teenager as well, and every time I put out a new song or something like that, I'm just ready for the world to eat me alive. Usually the world is just indifferent. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, it's you just have to understand how to give good, critical, constructive feedback. And and also as an artist, or as a person making assets for games, you just have to a sign of a very good, mature, creative artist is someone who doesn't really take it personally.
Yeah.
And everyone on our team is like that. I don't really see anybody ever taking anything personally, but you also have to be good at giving feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't be like, this sucks. That's not feedback.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It isn't feedback. Do you have anything, Brandon, for that to add to that?
Yeah, we've just been like you said, we do stuff in Teams chats. Occasionally what we'll do is when we have like syncs with, say we're doing like a group of enemies, for instance, we'll have feedback from, say, the concept artists or the enemy designers,
Right.
or the visual effects people, or the gameplay designers. They'll generally tell us if something will or won't work, or like if this particular sound isn't exactly feeling right, or if there are other systems that this might interact with, this particular set of sounds might interact with and might get too busy, etc. And you can make modifications based on that, but generally for in terms of more detailed feedback, it's generally kept within the audio team. And yes, as Josh pointed out, we've had like a really positive group of people here that tends to take and give rather detailed and just positive critique whenever people are looking for feedback generally.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Johnny, do you have anything to add?
I have a question here that's kind of mysterious to me, because when you play a video game, right, the sound is perfectly in sync with what's on screen.
Not always perfect.
Not always. And when it isn't, it's super noticeable, right?
Yeah.
So that makes me think there's a whole shebang but behind the scenes that goes on to make that work. And so for you guys, when you're saying, something's going to happen on screen, for example, opening a chest, like we were talking about. So Kratos is going there, he's opening a chest, he has some kind of cadence with which he does it, right? And like sounds will pop up in a specific way. So when you're tasked with creating the sounds for that, do you already have access to the final, animation and how it looks and stuff?
Question.
Yeah.
And how do you, from a practical standpoint, try to replicate that with the props? That seems like a very finicky thing.
Yeah, I mean, actually, since we use Unreal, it's not as hard. It's not that hard. Well, it's not hard to sync things. It's hard to make things sound good, but it's not hard to really sync things on a timeline. Like, it's sort of like the most similar to doing like movie post-production that we kind of have in making game assets. But if you like have, for example, a loot chest opening, like if it's a really small, if it's like the toilet, it's usually just going to be one sound, and that one sound usually has like 4 variations or something like that. So every time you open it, it's a little bit different. But like a bigger loot chest, you may want to create a couple of sounds for it. So you may want to do like the start of the chest, create the sound of whenever the player activates it. Then you put that sound on the very beginning of the animation timeline, and it'll always reliably trigger right there. But sometimes sometimes frame rates can dip, and to mitigate for that, you create multiple sounds and just put them on the timeline. So like just in case the frame rate dips, like you have like a failsafe there that can play another sound. Like, okay, this is the part where it actually opens. Okay, this is the part where the tray comes out, and you know, and then this is the part where we just, and then at the very end, I'll make a final thing, you know. So yeah, that stuff is, like I said, syncing isn't hard, but making the sound is kind of hard.
It's interesting about all the remote stuff, because that sort of changed some of my ideas about how everything's working. I'm a big fan of like in-office stuff. I always have been. Like, I mean, even though I work remote as a YouTuber, I don't necessarily love it. I'm definitely more of like, I like the water cooler moments, and you know, where people are like high-fiving each other over something good, and then somebody's like, "Did you see Game of Thrones?" And then pretty soon everybody's talking about that, and then you're like, "What about the game?" And then everybody, you know, and you get this awesome synergy that's so difficult remote. For example, we do Dungeons and Dragons remotely, and it's terrible compared to in person, and terrible in my view. Everybody else's view, it's fine, but I'm like a stickler for that. I'm like, no, man, you gotta, the warmth of another human next to you, the sound of Doritos from their bag. Those are things that will stick with me forever, right? So the remote part, I'm assuming for companies like yourselves, when you start to look at remote, there's also some huge benefits, obviously, too, because you can also get the negatives of, you know, people coming to your desk bothering you all the time. You know, that's something that I would have as my job, where you would get 80% less work done on a busy day for everybody else than maybe yourself. Maybe it was a dead day for you, but everybody else is bothering you, and you're like, dude, I got 10% of my stuff done because everybody's moving around. Going remote, doing all that kind of stuff, would you guys say personally, are you guys more of a fan of the idea of working? Do you like remote, ignoring that, you know, you can work in your underwear if you wanted? We don't need to talk about that. But are you guys fans of remote, or are you fans of in a group? And maybe that's just your age, because of course that would change depending on your age.
I'll be curious, Brandon. What do you think?
I enjoy working remote. I feel like I get a lot of I'm a lot more productive when I can kind of just focus in, but then you do miss that aspect of let's say you're doing, for instance, I'll just take an example from Wonderlands, when we were bug fixing near the end of the project and doing memory optimization and whatnot. You do miss that ability to like pull someone over to your desk and be like, "Hey, can you like take a look at this for me?" Maybe you're seeing a bug somewhere that I'm not.
Right.
It's also more difficult to work remote, especially when you're doing things like Foley and whatnot, because you have to have, not everybody has
I know what to say.
Not everybody has that Foley studio or an Atmos mix room in their studio. So to some degree you do have to go into office, but I guess it really depends on what particular kind of work you're doing.
Okay.
And how you individually work, because everybody works differently.
Yeah. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, we hired Brandon whenever we were shifting to full-time remote. But at the time we hired Brandon, we didn't realize that it was going to stay that way.
Right.
And so he moved down here and everything, and within a year, like, it seemed pretty much the writing was on the wall that we weren't going to.
Thanks for the move, but we don't need you in here.
It became kind of like, well, if we make people move here, now people are gonna, we're gonna be less competitive when it comes to hiring. Because not everyone wants to move to Texas. Surprise. But yeah, as far as like for me, it definitely, there is a certain loss to being in the office, because I was there doing it for like 12, 11 years or something like that. And, I remember the first time I ever went to a video game studio at Volition, and when I was 21, and I remember just thinking, like, I was just so in awe of like this building, because I was always a creative person and everything like that. But I could go to this place and there's nothing but like my people there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and it's
it's
all
your own starship,
people.
man.
It's a bunch of creative people, and there's this energy you feel where you're walking down the hallways just to grab a snack or go to the bathroom or something, and you see like people, like artists on their Cintiqs drawing a character, or animators animating something, or level designers building a level, and that is you can't replace that at all in the remote, because and like you could feel uninspired and take a quick break, go to the restroom or something like that, and then all of a sudden you saw something cool on the way back that, you know, you saw someone kicking ass and having a really good day. They're obviously in the zone, and it makes you want to go back and be in the zone. And so that's missing. But I don't like commuting. I don't miss that. You know, I have a lot more work-life balance now because of this, and so it's, you know, it's trade-offs. It's like, you know, you get something, but something gets taken away in return. So
it's going to be very interesting to see how in the future, if we see, if I'm not saying you could see a big difference between, let's say, a game made remotely and a game made by a group, but a lot of the people I talk to are older, you know, so well, younger too, but I guess when I started, most of them were still working within teams. And I remember hearing a story that was very cool where one of the artists didn't know what to do. They were stymied on something, and they walked by somebody completely unrelated to them in anything they were doing and had a picture of the character up, and they saw like a buckle on the character, and it gave them 500 ideas. They were like, and they told me, and this is an award-winning game, by the way, and they were like, if I had not done that, that idea would have never come to me in a million years. It would have never, ever come to me. And I get the idea of remote and certainly work life. I'm definitely more of a work-oriented than personal-oriented person. Like, I do, my work and personal are sort of garbled together just because of the way it is. But I sometimes wonder what we'll see as the years go by, and if you will see almost not a clinicalness to everything being sectioned off, but if you'll almost be able to see sometimes that organic connection between all these things may not occur as much. And I just bring that up because talking to people who work on RPGs and stuff, where somebody's like, dude, I walked by this guy and his only job was to write books in Oblivion, let's say.
Yeah.
You know? And by the way, hey, love those games. Some of the worst writing ever. So whoever that is, learn to write better. I'm just joking. But I don't like it.
Are you talking about the books inside?
Yeah, the books inside.
Did you read the books?
Dude, I tried. They're terrible. Oh my God. I can't stand them. I can't stand Elder Scrolls lore, like the stuff in their books, you know, when you open a book. I don't know why. A book within a book, right? But all jokes aside, there's something
that's different from journals, though. That's like that is like going to a place. Like, I actually kind of like reading journals.
I like reading journals. I can deal with journals. The only thing I can't deal with is the dude who decided that right before he dies, he grabs his Zune MP3 player from a fucking cabinet and records his death. I never want to hear that again in my life.
Audio logs, man.
I'm dying, and instead of saving myself, I want to tell you that, Julia, I stole the forks. And you're like, the fuck are we doing? But but the long story short of it is all these guys got together, and they were walking past each other, and everybody, and then somebody's noticed in one of the books that there was something that nobody had talked about. The person was just writing color, you know, that just for story, for flavor. And they put it in the game because the guy was like, holy crap, I never thought about that. And by putting that in, it connected like 50 other things in the game world. There was an organic feeling because there was a level. And to me, that level is what makes an amazing game. The level of where things aren't disconnected, where the flavor text is connected to some plant you see, which is connected to the sound, like a nin root in Elden Ring, the ones that give off that, you know, like... people will remember forever but they're all connected. There's that seamless bit that organically goes through. And I think as a game director, I've talked to Victor Magnuson from Fat Shark, who's done Vermintide and all those games and some others. And it seems like it'd be impossible if you weren't all in the same place to get that, to force that organic. Like, you'd have to be like, okay, read his journal, see if you can figure this out, versus everybody just sort of being in the same office. So it'll be interesting in 5-10 years to see how games feel. I'm sure some people are going back to in-office. You know,
some people do go in still. Like a lot of people do thrive off of it, and certain departments do. It's up to the department if they want to. but I think the industry as a whole, I think it's kind of like no take backsies. It's I think there's some companies that are still requiring people to move, but I think that's
pretty rough in today's day and age too. I mean, it's the costs are freakish depending on where you live, and requiring somebody to move is tough.
Yeah, and exactly, and like also, like game developer salaries are, pretty good, but like, are they pretty good for Santa Monica? Or like,
well, Portland versus where I live in Eugene on the West Coast, there's a huge difference between what your apartment may cost. So like it makes but you're still West Coast, so you could get that issue where a company is like, no, we're paying enough. You're like, nah, not for San Francisco. You're not. I mean, you might be for Eugene, Oregon, but it's interesting. Johnny, you've done your remote 99.999% of the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was before the pandemic for 4 or 5 years now.
What are you doing?
Software engineering.
Okay, gotcha.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think for me, I do miss the water cooler moments. But what I did find is similar to Brandon, when you can kind of craft your day, it really changes your productivity, because you can really set up your environment and your timings in a way that works for you. Everybody's different, right?
Yeah, it allows you to get in the zone a lot easier, for sure.
That's really cool, because at the office, in a way, my sprints of productivity were in between like water cooler breaks and different things that happen at the office. So, you go for a coffee, all of a sudden you're talking about, the Game of Thrones books or something. And then like that's kind of broken your
flow gets broken.
Your flow gets broken. And then, something happens at the desks and like it becomes a thing. So there's some give and take. I do miss the personal element in it, but I think the pros are huge, like not having to commute, being able to set it up on your end.
I think I'm the only person in the world who likes to commute. I'll just go that. Apparently,
I miss jamming out in the car.
Yeah, dude. I always made sure I had a nice sound system in my car. It was always either 20 minutes to an hour, and by the time I got home, I could never remember why I was mad. If I'm mad at work, man. And where here that 27-inch screen is piping stupid people's ideas to me 24/7. If somebody doesn't like you can't escape unless you really understand boundaries. And when I was working at my old job, I'd drive home and I would be like, wait, what? Like, what? Maybe that wasn't as big of a deal as I thought it was when I was at work. But again, positives and negatives for everything. It's going to be interesting to see how the industry goes, because video games is obviously forward thinking compared to, that's all you're doing is tech. So it only makes sense that we're some of the first and have been remotely anyway. Let's be honest. A lot of people, individual programmers, they're technically remote and they've made full games. So obviously you can do it, because we've seen what was it? Bright Memory. Isn't that the one, Johnny, made by the one guy? Isn't that the martial arts, Unreal, cyberpunk looking game that was, they say one guy. You never know that either, right? There's always that. I remember when the Ascent came out and they were like, there's only, somebody was saying there's only like 10 people working. And then the company themselves was like, that's not correct at all. There's 10 people in our office.
It's a little bit like
there's 150 people.
Risk of Rain 2. There are like 3 main devs, but then there's a huge QA
contractors
team from what's Gearbox, isn't it? Working with them.
Do you guys work
production? Gearbox publishes Risk of Rain.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank
gotcha.
you. Yeah, exactly. So, huge amount of people from the QA side coming in from Gearbox to help with the publishing and all that.
So I did want to ask you guys, let's break this down. Let's pick our favorite baby. What's your favorite weapon in a game sound? Has there been a sound in a game? Has there been a game that you've been playing and you're like, this is my favorite gun in a game? Favorite sword, favorite magic spell? Or most memorable? One that you'll always remember.
Are you thinking more recently? Or?
It can be recent. It can be even recent's fine, because of course there's been a number that I've actually really liked. The remake for Destroy All Humans has like the anal probe, and it's got that wet slurp, and it's
wow.
It's wrong.
Thanks for the description.
Yeah, I'm not lying. It's like,
slurp.
and the same thing with the head. You can blow people's heads off, and you get that wet, you know. And I love that sound. And it's just one of those ones that you find yourself doing a move that is inopportune because you like the sound. That's actually how I usually describe to friends if I know if a sound is good, because I will do said move regardless if that's the best move at the time, because it sounds cool, or an animation may be cool. But has there been anything that's impressed you guys even recently? It can just be impressive, you know, just something that you've liked the soundscape for.
What do you think, Brandon? You go first. I
Oh,
think
boy.
I need to mull this over. You know, I get
Yeah,
asked
yeah,
this
this
a
is a
lot, and I
different
never
question.
have an answer.
Is
I
it
don't know
because
why.
you're just, you know what's going into it, and therefore you're just like,
I'll say this, like, I've said this a lot, but like I've always really liked Watch's sound design.
oh, okay.
I really like
awesome.
their character sound design, and I love the mix of that game and how cleverly they mixed it. So it's the whole it's the whole package, really. But yeah, I mean, as far as like AAA games, I'm trying to think of what I've been playing AAA lately, because I don't, outside of Overwatch, I've been playing like more indie stuff, I think. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, I was actually, Josh, I was going to say Tracer's guns. They're so simple, but they sound so satisfying, and you can just fire them for hours and never get tired of hearing them. They just feel really good to shoot.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like we talk about there's throughout your career as a sound designer, you'll learn this very harsh lesson. The thing that sounds cool isn't always sounding cool repetitively.
Right.
Yeah, 30 minutes later, if it's slamming your eardrums, it can get a little fatiguing.
Right.
So like if you have a weapon, weapons are a good example of this. Like it may not be as impactful to you the first, 30 minutes you're using it, but after a little while you start appreciating the fact that, man, I've been playing this for hours and this still feels clean to me.
Right. It's not bothering me.
So I did play a bit of Elden Ring, and I enjoyed a good bit of that. Just the world design was my favorite, really, but I put it down for a month and I couldn't get back to it.
It's hard to get back to it, isn't it? Because it's like, oh, you forgot your skill cap and all that. Like,
yes, yeah,
dude, it happens with Assassin's Creed games. I'm like, I'm gonna do a walking the walk for this, so I'm starting to study, like listening to Viking lore or shit like that. I'm like, hey man, let's jump into Valhalla, level 60, level 300, whatever, and I'll get smoked. Like my body's made of handles, just dribbled around the game world, and I'm like, what the fuck? And it's a chicken. Or some, it's not even, if it was like something amazing, I'd be like, all right, this is cool, but it's not. I got to bring up one sound design that I thought was fantastic. So I'm doing a lot of testing for tech, for streaming. I'm doing some walking the walks on a couple games, and I randomly was streaming Far Cry 5, which is a game that have a love-hate I hate so much about that game, and then I like a lot. One of the characters has sandals, though. And the idea that they got the flip-flops to perfectly flip-flop is brutal. And so now I just run around with this character whose feet are flip-flopping perfectly, just going like, dude, that's the most satisfying goddamn sound I've ever heard. He's just running around, and if you've ever, we used to call them thongs when I was younger. Now thongs are underwear, but they used to be called thongs. Then they changed to flip-flops, which is, by the way, a more proper term anyway. But you hear this flip-flop, and you hear the foot, and then the sound of you can actually hear the toes bending the rubber, the toe part.
Oh, wow.
Because I've actually talked to one of the guys at Ubisoft, and I'm like, dude, I need to know. I need to know the deets. How did this? And then you hear that heel hit that flop. Then you hear the heel and the flop hit the mud. And it's that,
wow.
And you're just like, oh, dude, that's sweet.
So some sucker actually ran on mud with flip-flops.
Oh, of course, yeah. Or they at least figured out, the 3 or 4 major parts. Yeah. And what's even better is you never really see that. Because you're not, it's like Herc. I think it's Herc, which one of the characters. You're not looking at his fucking feet unless you're a weirdo. You're blowing people up. So it's like you never really even see it. But the idea that somebody did that is so great. And again, it's why music, audio, sound design is... I think it's so important. I mean, I love that people are getting more into it, but you hear something like that, and I know 99% of people will only pick up on it, like, if I mention it during a review. They might be like, oh, crap, that is happening. They probably just get a satisfied feel, like you guys said almost, where after 30 minutes you're not bothered by something. That's pretty good. That's like going to a family reunion and you're not bothered by anybody. That's a good family reunion. Most of the time, right? Most of the time.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Most of the time, you're like, dude, you guys are believing in UFOs and shit. I'm out. And instead, you go, and if everybody's having a good time, you're like, hey, man, this was a good. That's I had this argument with Austin Wintory because I don't agree
about UFOs.
No, but it was about if a soundtrack should elevate or be transparent, and it wasn't necessarily an argument, but he definitely is a little bit more on the transparent side that you don't need to notice. And I'm like, nah, man. Like when I have that boss moment. And I hear that, I mean, we talked about it in the last podcast, Johnny, where we were talking about the boss moments where the choir starts and they're choir. And you're like, yeah, we're doing it. And sometimes you hear people saying that doesn't matter as much, and then you know, some people it matters a great deal. But I get that there's some differences there. When it comes to soundtracks for you guys, moving into music, has there been anything lately music-wise, and it can be in your games too, that's caught you that you've liked? Do you guys listen to soundtracks outside of games, like official soundtracks? Are you guys buyers of those? Do you?
Actually, I'm not.
Okay.
At all. I'm not really a big consumer of any type of soundtrack. That's probably heresy a little bit for what I do, but I guess there is that aspect of like transparency there that like.
Yeah,
you know, it's meant to be a lot of it's a little drony these days and stuff. And I'm like, well, if I want to listen to ambient music, I'm going to listen to ambient music, you know. And I like music that's meant to be like designed to just listen to with a start, middle, and end. Personally, it's my preference. But I've always loved Jesper Kyd, you know, as a composer.
Yeah, right.
Our new composer, Josh Caro, he's a really awesome. I liked. Yeah, Jesper Kyd's probably one of my favorites for sure. He does a lot of the Assassin's Creed stuff, and I felt like his music really elevated Assassin's Creed 2. Just he has this production style that nobody quite has, you know, and I really like it a lot.
What about you, Brandon?
I'm actually looking at my game music Spotify playlist right now. So yes, I do listen to game music. I'm a big fan of like I've always been a big fan of like Mac Quayle. I think he did a really good I think his OST for Mr. Robot's fantastic, and what he did on The Last of Us 2 is fantastic. Josh mentioned Jesper Kyd. I love his stuff. Huge fan of Michael McCann, who actually also worked on Borderlands 3, but has also done things for like Deus Ex, and I really like his style in particular. Jack Wall's pretty cool too.
Finishing Move, those guys are great too.
Finishing Move is amazing. And one of my like childhood nostalgia favorite composers is probably Neil Acree of World of Warcraft fame.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because I mean, you mentioned him, but also Jack Wall. If I remember right, he hasn't really done much for games for a while, has he? I'm pretty sure he did He did Mass Effect, obviously. I think he did a Call of Duty, and then I was looking him up to do an interview, and it was pretty empty when it came to game. I don't know what's gone on there, if he's like stepped to the side and is doing movies.
I'm looking at him on Spotify. It seems like he's done a bunch of Call of Duties recently, occasionally.
I'm more of his Mass Effect. I got to tell you guys, I'm a huge main title fan, like the main theme. Like it rocks my world. I listened to Mass Effect 1's main theme for over an hour before I played the game because I couldn't stop listening to it. One that blows me away to this day, and I just revisited it due to DLC, is Dying Light 2. Dying Light 2's main theme is this discordant man. So Dying Light 2 is basically Robin Hood with zombies, Sherwood Forest, and tech all mixed together, and that's what they wanted. So for example, in Dying Light 2, when you're on the roofs of the buildings, it's supposed to feel like Sherwood Forest, a forest above the zombies, the danger of the zombies. And somehow, unbeknownst to me, that dude nailed it in the main theme. Like when it starts, it's this discordant, like there's a little bit of an orchestra, there's some strings, there's like some vocals, but it's like instead of the key you expect, instead of anything you expect, it's like a little warbly and a little off, and I hadn't heard it in a while. And I was like, oh, I'm going to, review this DLC or talk about it during the podcast. And I turned it on. I was like, oh, my God, that's good. I love that when you get that main theme that makes you want to play the game. It may have nothing to do with the game, but you're listening
to the Cyberpunk, the main theme.
Oh, yeah.
That always pumped me up before I
For me, it
jumped
was
in.
Deus Ex. Deus Ex,
Oh, yeah.
especially the first one, dun 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 dun, dun. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I had no clue if that was going to be in the game, but I was so hyped up, from that main music.
I like the Fallout 4 theme as well. That was a good one.
Dude, my wife will never forgive Fallout 3 for getting me into that layer of music too. That, don't want to set the world on fire. I hated that game. Took me about 6 times to get into it, and I'm pretty sure my wife was happy about that. And one time I finally got into it, and she had to hear that fucking song. Like, I mean, I remember her coming in and just being like, no, because my office is in the bedroom, and she is just like, please, no, not anymore. But it is. Go ahead. Go
Two games. Actually, I had remembered. I played Cult of the Lamb recently, and actually liked the music in that.
Yeah,
it is good.
Dude,
it's really appropriate, and it's kind of vibey and cool. Like, there's just some cool like there's just like some cool beats and stuff in it too.
I think that's you guys, obviously Brandon at a different time than Josh, but you come into the game industry and you have the different instruments and different tools. It's one of the reasons why I'm so happy about Unreal, because I grew up when you could make a mod maybe, but making your own thing was pretty difficult. And then over time, you start getting these engines that are a little better, and you get CryEngine, you get all this stuff. And then Unreal, especially now, has nailed it to the point to where, it is a legitimate possibility to see somebody make a game, let alone a mod that's incredible. I don't know if you guys just saw yesterday's release of Mass Effect's mod, the vintage mod, which quite literally changes the entire game, adds in thousands of NPCs on the space.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. Like, if you read the mod, I just kept laughing out loud like a madman, because I was like, what? Like, what are we even talking about? This is a game. It makes no sense.
How many people worked on it?
A couple, but not a ton. It was like 6 main modders, and they just went nuts. They found old words that weren't in it. They even added their own journal entries for shit.
Wow.
It's like, I was just reading this Nexus file going like, well, what where are we now? And it's so cool to see it. You guys were mentioning Unreal and stuff, and it's so cool to see the ability for people to make stuff, because that used to be, I get that the barrier of entry is cool too. Sometimes that is cool. It weeds out the people who aren't really motivated to make something good.
Right.
But at the same time, man, dude, Unreal's changed the fucking game, man.
Yeah, it's still hard, but it's a lot more accessible if you really want to get into it, for sure. I mean, the same thing's true with making electronic music or music at your house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I should know. I bought Omnisphere.
Yeah, that's right. How's that going?
Fuck off, man. You know what? I still mess around with that, but I don't even know why about that. But anyway, yeah,
you're right. Stuff in there.
There's some cool stuff, but for that cost, come on, man. Come on.
Oh yeah,
that's on me. But you're right, Josh. It's so cool because, like you said, it is still hard, and the ability to make something fun is not. It's never going. You can't push a fun button. That doesn't work. Yeah. We've seen that. Right. But it is so. It's, to me, like, this is sort of what I was hoping for, because I was talking to Johnny a couple weeks ago while we were talking on the podcast, and I said, 2 games now have eclipsed my dreams, which I never thought I would be able to say that, and I'm very happy I can. And one is No Man's Sky.
I was going to guess that one.
Yeah. As a child, I remember just wanting to be able to land, and I didn't even know what first person was, because no game was first person. It was pre-Doom. It was Akabeth was line drawing on a TSR or TRS-80. But and I was talking with my friends, and I still remember this discussion where we were like, imagine, seeing readouts, because even text and stuff wasn't a thing as much then. And I was like, imagine being able to land, blah, blah, blah. And, No Man's Sky, it launched like a wet turd on cement. It was terrible. They fucked up everything. It was just a disaster. But it's not anymore. And it has eclipsed my dreams, which I remember my mom and dad, they're like, we don't know what you do, but you seem pretty passionate about it. And I was like, well, I don't know what Dad's dream was. He loved to hunt. So maybe his dream was getting a,
deer hunter.
Or, well, by the way, I did send him some video here recently of Hunter Call of the Wild to say, like, this is possible now. But No Man's Sky, man, it's unbelievable that everything is in the game. And
Yeah, I haven't played it since like their 1 year patch. That was the first time I played it. But I haven't played it since then. But it seems like it's living up to its full potential.
And we live in a magical time where that's like, remember game engines? You couldn't get out of the car because there was one game engine. It was the driving part. There was no.
Yeah, now you can fly your Flash Gordon looking ship
and build
into
it
a planet,
into a planet underwater and build a city. Just because you're just like, wait, what? You know, it's awesome. And Unreal's allowing people who see No Man's Sky to build on that, which is what excites me, because No Man's Sky is space, and you sort of see that thing. GTA 5, I think we can all admit, for an open world game, probably the best example of, you know, it's got its multiplayer, it's got its civilizations, its people, all that stuff. But it's so awesome to see all this kind of stuff, and it's cool. For example, musicians like. So in the old days, the developers a lot of times were the people doing the music, you know, like they were just doing. And now it's so cool that you guys can just mention Kid, and everybody, not everybody, but the people watching this will know because I talk about it. But that's so cool. It's something about that is so amazing, where you can mention somebody when it comes to sound, and people know who you're like, they know who you're talking about. And you can go and get those, and then another person can go and see that and go, well, I like Jack Wall's ideas for, let's say, for Mass Effect. You know, in a game, Unreal, I can put some modules in seconds and start making music in Unreal, even though, like you said, it's not going to be good, but you can do it. Dude, we live in a magical time, man. I mean, like, my curiosity for games is bigger than it was when I started, because everybody can jump in and do stuff. Like Brandon's doing movie stuff and then makes the jump to games, which I think in the old days, remember, you'd hear even the difference between CGI and practical effects guys. There was always that big gulf. Like, you know, the practical, which I love practical effects, but
then I prefer them these days.
I prefer them. But what I've been seeing is the mixture where they fix a little bit of the practical effect to make, you know what I mean? And now we're seeing the synergy where people can be like, boom, I'm bouncing in. And you can mix everything together. Like, fucking sky's the limit, man, for what we can see. And now you're getting video games where the cutscenes are movies. I don't know if you got, shout out to this channel, Gamer's Little Playground. They take cutscenes for all the games. They make them movies, no talking.
Oh yeah,
I watch some of their stuff.
Dude,
actually.
I think I'm subscribed to 3 channels: Writing on Games, them, and maybe IGN, just because I want to tease them. But I'm just joking. Gamers Little Play. It's incredible, and there's other channels that do this. But the idea that these cutscenes now are movies themselves are. Yeah, dude, it's so good.
And there's also when I first got into the industry in 2007, like. When I was going to school, I went to school at Full Sail University in Orlando, and I was there for just a year. But the year I was there was basally no knowledge of game audio, sound design, or anything like that as a career path.
Okay.
And nowadays, schools actually have curriculum based on it, and there's a lot of schools that do. Full Sail is one of them now. You know, Vancouver Film School as well. But yeah, but now there's this like newfound deeper appreciation for game audio, and there's more people than ever who are wanting to get into the industry. Now, also at the same time, there's more jobs now than ever. For what we do. So there's more competition, but there's more jobs as well. So, but
can you help us understand kind of the breadth of your job description? Because obviously, you know, there's so much stuff that goes into it. Like, you have audio acquisition, like, you know, are you the guy with the mic, right, capturing stuff? Are you the guy doing the mixing of sounds and maybe elevating them with like different samples and stuff like that? Are you more on the programming side, or like bringing it in, you know, like, can you help us understand, like, each of you two, like, where's your kind of area of
what's your bailiwick?
Getting your hands dirty, in that whole process.
So that's changed a lot over time, and Brandon's seen that change even just within a past year or two. But when I first got hired, I was hired on as a sound designer, There are
You're
audio
the guy.
programmers.
You do everything like.
Just do all the sounds and do implementation of those sounds, because it was really important to know the tools, know how to make the sounds, and know how to implement them. As time has gone on, we now have people like myself. I'm still a sound designer. I'm lead sound designer, but I still do sound design. But now we have a tech team that works on systems and implements our sounds kind of for us. But we still do a little light implementation, like in Wise and stuff like that. But as far as we have a whole specialty now called tech sound design, where they can still do some sound design stuff, but it's not what they're required to do. They will hook everything up. So we have in-house composers now who just focus on the music. We also have audio programmers. We have an audio director. We have an associate director of sound design. We have VO directors as well, and VO designers. And it used to be when I was first in the industry, I was the VO designer, I was a sound designer, I was a tech sound designer.
All the hats.
All the hats. And since Brandon, and he can speak to this a little bit too, like he's seen some rapid changes in our own department, and it's just there's more. We need people to specialize in these categories, because it's getting harder and harder and harder for one person to be able to.
The job is bigger now. You need to partition it in a way and specialize.
Yeah, games are getting a lot bigger, so you do have that level of specialization. But for me, it similar to what Josh said, I'm occasionally recording. I am usually mixing stuff on my DAW, finding samples and whatnot until I punch up various assets, doing some light implementation, possibly writing some Unreal Blueprint code, depending on how if I have like an idea for something I want to do that's really specific and I just want to like jot it down really quickly and get it in the game. Most of the time that is handled by our technical sound designers or audio programmers if it's far more high level. But it's day to day, it's mostly doing that. We did all come into mix Wonderlands together, so we did kind of have that camaraderie moment for like a few weeks while we were doing that. But it was we tried to keep the people actually mixing at the computer and at the board to several people, because you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. However, right. We generally had like a number of people in there making calls and doing things, so we are mixing to a degree. It is very much in flux, especially after COVID, but I think it's mostly just become about specialization, that sort of thing.
It's very interesting you mentioned the mixing, because usually with music specifically, you have one person doing the mixing, or at least in charge of it, because they kind of have a vision for the song, don't they?
Right.
They kind of know, here I want to highlight the piano a bit, or like here's what I want to stand out. And when it comes to games, that kind of takes place too, where no, I want this sound to be really prominent, right? Or like, oh no, here it needs to be heard that this person is saying that thing, all this kind of stuff. But,
I have a question for you guys. What DAW are you using?
I'm using. Sorry,
yeah, go for it. Go for it.
I use Ableton most of the time. I use Reaper occasionally, and we are Nuendo Studio, so I do use Nuendo at the studio and occasionally at home. Those are my three main DAWs.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
For me, like I started out with the Pro Tools, and then we became a Nuendo Studio because all of our hardware at the facility works with Nuendo. And but as far as like if there's and I make music in Ableton, I don't really make game audio assets in Ableton, but as far as like if there's a game audio industry standard DAW, it's Reaper, hands down.
Oh,
Isn't
really?
it funny?
Really?
I was using Reaper day one when that got released as like a freeware, like just some random guy. And I remember talking to Elijah Chuck about it, and he's like, dude, and then I don't know if you guys get to talk to him, but Justin Bell, who did who did Outer Worlds, and he's like, I'm gonna check out this Reaper thing, and I'm like, dude, you're not gonna check it out. You're going to be stuck in it. And
you're going to fall in.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, that just goes to show you what somebody can do if they have a very particular idea. It's taken a while for that to come to maturity, but it's insane
You know, that's
to me. Insane.
It's the same developers as Winamp.
No, is it
Oh.
really?
Yep.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that
funny.
at all. Yeah. It's nuts, man. It's like I remember using all the big tools and hearing about this Reaper, and they were like, yeah, and we allow this and this for free. And I was like, hey, that's, I had some crashes on it, but I was like, I can pretty much, you can come to grips with it. And then when you hear like pros are using it, that's when you're just like, I'm sorry, what? Like that came on a CD in an Xbox magazine or something. It's like now people like you guys are yourselves are using it. It's just that's awesome to me. It's awesome because it also shows utility equals utility can actually equal sales into an industry that you might assume would be locked off. You might assume would be locked off just because we've seen that in the past where it's like, you can only use this camera because only this is available for it and blah, 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 blah. Not with, I mean, maybe some in some ways, but overall, I've seen Reaper basically take by storm almost every single composer I talk to and most sound people are like somebody's using it for something.
Too, going on the line of what you were saying about the engines providing accessibility for people to do awesome stuff with low footprint as a team. Like for someone new jumping into sound stuff, you could really pick any DAW that's, decent. Like I've always used Cubase. That's the one I've become familiar with. And you can really like get to a very high level with that before you're limited by specific features that you would have to go to Reaper or other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of encouraging for new people out there. Like if you're listening and you're thinking, I want to screw around with, making music or making sounds. You could really pick any of these that we mentioned and like get really far with it, which is really cool. Yeah.
And really, once you've learned one DAW, you've kind of learned them all in a lot of ways. And it'll be easier to transition for you.
The only one I can't transfer to is the one that's vertical.
What? Which one's that?
Which one?
Is it Ableton? What? So normally I work this way, and one of them's this. John, we've talked about this before because I've tried.
Ableton has both.
Yeah, it's not Ableton. There's one where it's just and I remember trying.
You're thinking of tracking or trackers.
Is it trackers?
Yeah, like that's how like old video game music.
All I know is I saw it and I was like, nope, I noped out.
Wow,
it was impossible, man. Because I remember us talking about it one day, and because Absy, I should have got Absy on this podcast too.
A lot of chiptune artists do it.
Yeah. That's I mean, it is so cool that people can jump into this, pretty much regardless and be able to get a long ways. I was talking to Ron Jankees. He was going to write some music. He's an awesome guy. He's going to write some music for our intro when we were on Twitter. Well, he's gone now, but he's sort of left the scene. But when we were getting him to do we wanted a Twitch entry, like an entry music video, 30 seconds to a minute of his music, and I was talking to him. I remember like watching, what he was using, Fruity Loops at the time, the stuff that I think a lot of people are like, pip, Fruity Loops. And I'm like, dude, Ron Jenkins is jamming the fuck on Fruity Loops. So I'm going to tell you right now, if he can do it and just make some insane music, you can pretty much use anything. And it was so cool to talk to him about what he used and how, like, he just didn't care. Dude, you use
Fruity Loops is great.
Paper. It is. It's got some, I don't know how to describe it. I guess it's what a lot of people consider the low budget, entry, or for some reason. But dude, I used Fruity Loops for years and made some really cool tracks. So it's like F off, you can make it.
No, there's like people who are professional electronic musicians that only use it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, there's so many people.
So let's say you guys make a game, you release it, you're really proud of it, and some jackass ACG reviewer is like, I don't like the sound.
Shits on your game.
Yeah. How does patching sounds work? And the reason why I bring this up is I was looking at Dying Light 2, and they had some sound effects. They had some latency issues on something. They had a couple little issues, and they've always been really good about saying, like, this sound didn't play, this blah, blah, blah. When a game is released, you're using QA, I'm assuming, to try to track as much as you can. But let's say you've released the game and someone on the forum somewhere reports the second swing on a sword doesn't make a sound or whatever. What do you do? What are the steps? I've never been able to figure this out, probably because I've never asked it accurately. But what would you do if you saw that? Do you have an internal thing where you have to write it up, or do you just jump in to whatever game and start going like, oh shit, that second swing doesn't make a sound effect? Like, how do you guys fix something after it's released?
Yeah, we typically will write up a Jira ticket, or a Jira is our tracking software. And what?
I hate Jira. I never want to use I just hate tracking software, and Jira gives me actual like tension hearing the name, man. When you'd wake up and you'd see your Jira list and you're like, so continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's typically a little bit of a system in place because you have to be very careful with post-launch changes, obviously,
Sure.
And it just basically needs to get all the right eyeballs on it. And there's certain points of post-development where you can say, okay, this can be a candidate for this patch, and then you can change it. You can change it locally and then submit it through Perforce. And programming will usually integrate it, and once it gets integrated, it could get sent out for the next patch, basically.
So it's not really, I mean, I don't want to say it's not a lot of work, but what I'm saying is, if you hear about an issue, you don't need it to be reported 1,000 times. You guys on if somebody just mentions it in your group and says somebody on a forum is saying that this doesn't work, you guys are pretty able to jump in. Like, and do you guys have a scheduled time for that? What I mean by that is the game releases on a Tuesday. Do you guys have like a week afterwards where you're actively looking for those? Do you see what I'm saying? How are you getting that data, I guess? Is it just official reports? Or are you quite literally looking on a forum to see what people are saying?
Well, QA is often still testing the game after release. It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah, for sure.
For years. Sometimes I don't think we see stuff on forums that we don't already know about. It's pretty rare.
Yeah, gotcha.
Whenever we shipped to Wonderlands, there were some UI mix issues, but we were already aware of those and we were already working on them. I don't think we've seen anything on a forum or Reddit or anything like that where we're like, oh, how did we miss this?
Right.
It hasn't happened quite yet. But I mean, it's usually our QA teams are good enough to find most things, but there's subjective things that we see all the time, but we don't usually change those. So
yeah, right.
Like, we don't want to content swap something just because somebody didn't like it online, but
Yeah, there's a certain like triage. There are triage levels of like, okay, is this a game-breaking bug? Or is this like something that is like something that you think should be changed, but doesn't really? Something more important could go in that slot for the patch.
Sure.
So it all depends on that particular priority system as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're developers, and we're very critical of our own work, and there's so many times where I'm like, man, I wish I would have done this or that different, or I would love to swap it. But you just need to be like, sorry, abandon it, man. It's just move on to the next thing and do better next time.
And no developer, I mean, I talk about this all the time, and I think people believe this. I truly do think people believe this. I'm going to make them sound stupid, but I really do believe that some people think a developer wakes up and says, man, I really want to make a shitty game today.
Yeah.
Let's make a shit game.
And no one has, by the way, even people who put out low quality like knockoffs want the quality knockoff of, let's say, their shoes, their fake Nikes, their Nukis. They still want them to be good enough to pass a particular thing. And you get this thought process. And that's why I wanted to ask you how you take the feedback in, and if it's organic or if it's like we already knew, because that's one of the things that even when I talk in, I've seen it, especially lately, and I've definitely been self-conscious myself versus the past where I might have pulled the trigger on a couple things where now I'm like, wait a minute. There's a pretty good chance they already know this. So instead
like you noticed something in a game that you thought needed fixing or something? Or?
Yeah, and that the developer didn't already probably know. And I think that it comes from a place of ego. I mean, it's possible somebody missed it, but like you guys said, most likely everybody knew. It's just like it couldn't be fixed at that time, or as you said, it's a choice. It's like, this is what we're going with, even if a reviewer or somebody on a forum doesn't agree with it. And in the old days, I probably would have pulled the trigger on a review and been like, what the fuck? Now I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, you know, is
Yeah.
I don't like it. I'll say that, but I especially now, like I said prior to the podcast, it really does feel like a lot of people just don't like games who are covering games, and I'm watching it going like, you know, I'm watching some coverage of something. I'm like, dude, do they even like this? Like, do they?
Mhm.
Like, why are we all here if this is and we saw, you know, this is a big deal. It's with everything. We saw it with music, we saw it with movies, where, you know, critics sort of, you have that revolution where people change or they become the old man in the group, you know,
Right.
who's like screaming at clouds, the Cisco and Eberts, who even themselves changed over time, which was good.
Yeah.
That's the way you should do it. And now we're seeing everybody being able to create everything. I think also the equilibrium is weird, because I'll get people going like, well, this game's got issues, but only 2 people made it. And I agree with that thought process, but I don't have to I don't want to investigate the number of people who made something versus the cost. If they're charging me 60, they're charging me 60. 60 is what it is, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But we are getting so many games that we are seeing, I think, some confusion on people's parts over what's on purpose and what's just good enough. What's just like, you know, at $40, you have a Vampire. I believe Vampire was 40. It had some issues, but I loved it. But if it was 60, right, I might have been like, guys, you know, there's a couple things here that maybe, you know, the animation might be a little wonky at 30, but you're like, hey, that's $30. And I think it's very cool that we have like Steam. You got your 99-cent game, you got your $59 game, and I love that. I think that people don't think about it as much as they probably should, but it's very cool to see, even for you guys, where you have DLC that's a certain price, then you got your main game is a certain price, and especially like a Borderlands, where the game is more about, I don't want to say it's all about loot. It's not, but you get my drift. It's a different style than, let's say, a DLC story. And I expect different things from both, even if they're the same price. Like if you guys charged $60 for a Borderlands, the expectations for your story may not be, I'm just going to be honest, my expectations for your guys' story may not be at the same level as a Mass Effect. Where a Mass Effect, I'm looking for particular things and stuff like that. And when it comes to game making for you guys, do you guys, when it comes to good enough, or when it comes to, we know that this isn't perfect or what have you, and you said just wipe, I think Josh said just like, let it go. You got to let it go. Do you drink that night? Do you go like, child's gone, they left the house, we know it's not perfect, let's get drunk? I mean, do you
gotta ship it?
Do you hold on to it? I mean, or do you how do you get rid of it if you do? How do you say, okay, it's out? And like psychologically, is it like, what do you, are you able to do that? Are you truly able to just walk away?
Yeah,
go
go for it. No, you go for it.
Okay,
I actually
fine.
want to know I want to hear.
Yeah,
your answer on that.
I want to hear what somebody's going to say. You both had something to say. Go for it, Brandon.
Yeah. So being super young in the industry, comparatively, or just in general, it is that weird feeling of kind of the empty nest syndrome, like my, like the game, there's these little changes that I want to make and I won't be able to make them because games are a series of interlocking systems, and you know, at the end of the day, sometimes changing one thing might break everything. You know what I mean? You have to fix like 10 other issues. But I've since Wonderlands has been out, I've come to realize that similar to like when artists release an album and it feels like imperfect, art is just kind of like a time capsule of who you were and the people that made it at the time. And imperfections are just going to be natural and sometimes more desired than a quote unquote perfect game, because it really feels like somebody made it. So to a certain degree, you want to change it, but also feel that I kind of would never change it. You know, I wouldn't touch it again, you know?
And that doesn't, and so you're saying, so the next day you wake up, Brandon, you're like, all right, man, we released this game. You wake up, you're telling me you're really not opening up your DAW one more time to be like, maybe.
No, I actually, I did do that. I opened up the editor, opened up Wise, because again, like after launch, you're always looking for bugs or things that you can put in and whatnot, in whatever capacity you can, depending on how the patch is shaping up. So you do have a little bit of that, but there is also that realization that like, hey, not everything you want to change is going to get changed.
Yeah. Right.
So you do have to just kind of sit with that and accept it.
What about you, Josh?
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny hearing Brandon's perspective, and I think what he said there was so beautiful because it is a time capsule of like who you were at that moment, and that's the damn truth. I mean, I remember there's like whenever I finished Borderlands 2, like after putting your heart and soul into that and so many hours into it and everything, after shipping it, I could barely listen to it because I was just hearing things in my head that
gotcha.
I could hear things that like I knew I could have done better or whatever, but like now that I've distanced myself from it, it's been over 10 years now, I can just look at it like Brandon's talking about, like, oh, that's who I was at that time, and everything. And usually, I mean, let's be real, it's audio. We're the only ones that notice.
Yeah.
If it's a problem, it's really a problem only in our heads, and that happens a lot with like music. Music is the same way for me. Like I'll put something out like a year ago and I'm like, man, but I look at how far I've come over the like past year and I'm like, okay, well, I have to be happy about that. And and I remember there was a moment on Wonderlands, I think, where I was talking to Brandon and I could feel his jitters, like kind of like,
oh yeah,
being unsure of himself and everything. And I was like, I promise you it's fine. And I promise you it does get easier because you just do it so much. We make thousands and thousands and thousands of assets for each game that we're developing. You have to do it. You have to keep going. And for better or for worse, some things are going to be like you're super proud of. Some things are going to be like, I could have done it better because you're working on thousands of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure thousands of those things you work on aren't even getting into the final game anyway, right? I mean, you guys are like, you're making assets that sometimes just, for whatever reason, maybe you scratch it and move on to something else, or...
that happens less now than it used to.
Okay, gotcha. I was not aware
we're
of that.
We're getting a bit more efficient about making decisions.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But it's not that it doesn't still happen because features get cut and everything like that. Yeah. But we have like a audio producer now who actually is very good at like risk assessment on certain tasks that we have. Like, okay, can you actually see that design is really invested in this? Are they working in it? Or are the artists working on it? Are the animators working on it? Has there been concepts made? Okay, if those things are together, then it's probably okay for us to start developing palettes and start recording things for it. So there's, and before we didn't really have that kind of level of production assistance, because we would have to do that ourselves, but also make the assets and everything like that. And so there would be moments where, oh, that was a bunch of wasted work, or and you get burnt out a lot easier when that's happening. But nowadays we're getting a lot. I'm not saying we're perfect, but the level of risk assessment and knowing whether or not something's going to get thrown out, like you can generally figure that out.
I like the idea of not going. We used to, obviously this is not like we made up the term, but going off half cocked, where you're like, all right, man, let's do it, and then you find out no one else is working on anything that's supportive of whatever you're doing, and you're like, we're screwed because this is probably not going to get used. So the idea that somebody is there and is taking that into account and being like, okay, well, we do know that this and this and this are happening, so there's less of a risk of working on it than if none of those had been. Yeah, I'm always I love talking to people about like issues in development where things go dramatically terrible or some magic point happens, and I still think one of the best experiences of people going off half-cocked is Daikatana's Arrow, which was where one of the artists for Daikatana made an arrow with 1 million polygons, which was more than the entire screen could display. And it was a misread on everybody's part. And I remember just being like, I get it. I get it, because I've seen it in other businesses for sure, where you know, and so now when people are talking more, I think that's also cool. Obviously, the engines help too, because in Unreal or something like that, you can see what other people are doing, or you can see other modules. Where in the past, I know when I was talking to Justin when he had started, like the audio stuff wasn't even connected in 99% of the ways. You know, it was like you had to do this import and that, and so nobody would see it until you were doing that. Where now it's like, oh yeah, there's obviously assets for all of this stuff in Unreal or in whatever engine we're using, and I think that's just gonna make gaming, dude. It's such a good time for games, man. Like I was telling a friend, they were like, "Why is Elden Ring a big deal?" And I'm not as hot on Elden Ring nearly as other people. I liked it a lot, but I'm not like it hasn't changed my universe. But one of the things I had tried to tell him was that Elden Ring finally lets. It's a little bit like No Man's Sky, where it lets people get into Dark Souls, where it doesn't remove the people who are really good at a Dark Souls game being able to do that. It's where it says, hey, you know what? We're gonna let you sort of figure this out at a speed where the human brain needs a little bit of time to memorize something. In Dark Souls, I remember dying and going, I don't even know what happened. And I was good at those games, and I was still like, what the fuck happened right then? What? And Elden Ring's like, we're gonna give you that almost like sleep after you cram for a test, where the brain is like, and it's writing those memories down. And we're seeing that now, where all these people can see all the different parts of game engines. We're starting to see the Elden Rings, the No Man's Skies. And dude, I got to tell you, man, I don't think I've been, and audio, again, to me is such a big deal. I don't think I've ever been this excited for like games, because we're just starting to see all of this overlap. Even, for example, when I was a kid, I would watch Legend or Willow, and I knew that no one knew what the fuck I was talking about. I'd be like, I watched Legend like 300 times until my dad threw away the cassette tape. He was like, I never, ever want to hear the soundtrack for this again. And I was like, dude, it was my favorite movie of all time. I was like, you don't understand and my dad was a fisherman, so he didn't know what fantasy was. He was like, what's a sword? And I'm like, well, it's like a fish hook, except it's huge and you stab things. It's like, well, it doesn't work in real life. So no one gives a shit. And he was never that mean, but he just didn't tie it together. And then we see Lord of the Rings, the movies, come out. And I knew at that moment, oh shit, we might be able to see TV shows, which is something that in the past, if you did see a fantasy show, that shit was terrible. You know, you were like, oh man.
No. It was and like B-movie, B-series.
Whoa, B, Q for quality, lack of it. That shit was bad.
Sci-Fi Channel.
Bad. No, sci-fi was even like, fuck that. We're not going there. But now, and then you get superhero TV shows that are good. And you get, and I'm not even a superhero fan, but I am excited for those things, because then you get video games becoming TV shows. Now, of course, we can make Halo where nobody even watches Halo and tries to make a TV show. They fucked that up. But you got Gears just getting announced as a TV show. And, you know, Dave Bautista running around shooting people and sawing people up. I'm like, I'll check in for one season of that. I love that everybody, the water cooler moment, everybody can talk about it now. And there's something so magical about, my mom and dad are going to be too old that they at least understand it. And I think that it's cool now, because everybody who is coming up to grips now, you have TV shows, you've got movie stars talking about that they're fans. And we saw it with the Xbox. I remember the Hobbit kid who played the Hobbit in the Hobbit movies, who played the main guy. What's his name?
Frodo?
Elijah Wood.
Elijah. Sorry, I called him Frodo.
You did. Same
He's
thing.
Frodo in our hearts.
Yeah. Elijah Wood was like an Xbox fan, right? And you were in Snoop Dogg, and you were like, cool, Snoop Dogg. And, you know, you were like, yeah, but he's always high. Like, I probably can't tell my parents that. They're probably not going to be excited. But now you got all these movie stars, all these people talking about it. Henry Cavill, who's a huge Warhammer fan. And by the way, unrepentant, which is the best part of that. He's not like... he's like
unapologetic.
He's like, dude, have you seen Warhammer? And you're like, and it's so cool to be. We are in a great time period right now for games, because we're starting to see TV shows becoming games becoming TV shows, movies, and to me, it's the best. It's probably the best time to be a gamer, because then you can get people who want to also mix it up. We had Bandersnatch. I don't know if you guys saw that on Netflix, which was like the mixed TV, right? Guys, I came from the time when trying to explain a game, you know, parents just don't. Will Smith, parents just don't understand, right?
I mean, games were kids' toys back in the day. And now the kids are growing up to be adults. And now you have adult games. You have like The Witcher 3 is an adult game. It's not for kids. And so like that's only going to continue. The other generations are never going to get it, but we grew up with it, and it's not going to be just a thing for boys too.
Right. That's one of the best parts, man. My wife and I mean, I can fully admit when we were living apart, we hadn't moved in together. I mean, we were living in separate cities. We were playing a French MMO called Dofus. Weird name. Really cool cell shaded MMO. And I was just like, this is awesome to be able to like, Sims, which is one of my favorite games of all time we played, and those kind of things.
I find that very, very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, what?
That you've played like every game, but staying for The Sims,
Yeah, Sims is probably my number one game of all time.
That's insane. That's awesome.
Yeah. I love putting unexpected. 4 people in a room, locking the doors, and letting them turn into ghosts, man. I am methodically devilish in Sims. Like putting them in swimming pools, deleting the ladders, and just being like, ha 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 ha, and sitting back and just watching anarchy. But no, Sims is cool because I was a fan of the Norns, creatures, an older AI game. I'm a fan of seeing systems interact and what you can do, and the ability for me to tell my mom and dad that Witcher is a game when they watch the movie, the TV show, is fantastic to me.
Yeah.
And you guys were talking about, new people coming into games. It's one of the reasons why sometimes I get mad where somebody will be like, well, you've never played an RPG unless you played Final Fantasy the original. I'm like, bitch, they weren't even a sperm. You're talking to somebody who's 14. It was another 15 years prior to them being born. Why are we telling this person you can't enter our group if you haven't played a game that was 20 years prior? That's like those people who tell you haven't seen a movie unless you've seen like Casablanca. It's like, shut the fuck up, man. That makes no... And so we get new people every day coming into the industry. It's exploding. And we're seeing them not just in that industry, but also branch, the TV shows and the movies. Mm-hmm. And that's what's so exciting to me, man. It's so exciting because everything is happening. AI is another thing. I don't know if you guys saw Google's AI compression for music. Mind-blowing.
Nah.
Dude.
What is it?
So listen to this. They used AI. This is something, by the way, Johnny can back me up. A year ago, I said somebody's for sure going to do this. It will happen.
Yeah.
They use AI to sample the music, and they use AI to compress it to the point to where it's still to a human appears to be lossless.
Mm-hmm.
They took a 560 kilobyte sample to 6.
Oh wow.
And it is mind-blowing. I was just listening. Now, by the way, you and I, we would be able to hear, you can hear it. They were trying to show you can keep the gist of the music at this very low bit rate.
Yeah.
But at 6, it was listenable. So at 12, it was nuts, and you can look it up online. They have these white papers about it. I'm a huge AI fan. Like, that's my biggest thing right now is I even use AI to write fake reviews as a joke. And I'm checking the AI for music, and I'm like, we're already getting AI upsampling. We're getting AI changing the res. Why not go to an Assassin's Creed and clean up the samples in Assassin's Creed Valhalla? Why not figure out ways to do all this stuff? And we're starting to see console makers. Obviously, we've seen it with NVIDIA with the Tensor cores, where they're like, well, we're going to just put some AI chips on our card. And it's like, what we can do with AI is mind-blowing right now, let alone when people start looking and saying, oh shit, you know what are we doing? Why? And it's the difference between a big horsepower engine and turbo. When I grew up, it was like you had your 400 horsepower V8, and then somebody with 120 horsepower turbo would beat you, and you'd be like, what the fuck? That makes no sense. That's the way we are now, where it doesn't have to be a native 4K. You don't have to just say it has to. It's like, well, what if we have an upsample algorithm that technically adds more detail than the original 4K does, which is what NVIDIA is doing. And now we've got it for audio. And what are we going to see? I use audio fake voices right now for a joke for our D&D game. You can't tell.
Oh, wow.
You can't tell,
Really?
It's, Altered is one of them, and then another one's called Resemble. And you can type in, like, surprise, and they'll be like, really? Where's the, and you're just sitting there going, like, what the fuck? Like, that's better than it's better than 32 or 64-bit systems. It may not be equal to human, but it's certainly better than Space Harrier on the Sega Master System, where it was like, get ready. And you're like,
yeah.
So I don't know, man. I don't know if you guys are checking AI, but that's where my big like excitement is for games on what we're going to be able to see for AI. VR. I'm huge into VR. Have you guys fucked around with VR at all? Either one of you guys?
I have a Quest 2.
Quest 2. Gotcha. What about you? Josh has said
still holding off on that. Like I saw that new meta, the Quest Pro.
Quest Pro.
And it actually is the first one that like made me go, maybe that's it. Maybe that's the one I get. Or maybe I wait another gen or two just to see. But yeah, I'm still kind of holding out on the VR thing. I think it has a lot of potential, and it's either gonna just take over, or it's gonna be the most amazing flop ever.
I think with Borderlands VR, which I've checked out, and VR games that are built on main games, not VR sample games, but like Skyrim VR, Fallout VR, those are your examples of like, for example, Fallout 4 on VR is nothing like Fallout 4. I don't even know how to describe it. Going into a room in Fallout 4 in VR is 10,000 times the experience as going into a room in Pancake. It's not even equivalent. It's like a Pancake version is looking outside when it's raining. VR is going outside in the rain. And the difference is astronomical when it comes to experience. But there's been a lot of letdowns, and there's been a lot of issues with tech. I have every headset, I think, every single headset that's available, because I do review them. And I got to tell you, playing Dungeons & Dragons, Demio is one of the softwares right now for playing Dungeons & Dragons in VR or VR chat. It's unbelievable, man. It's such, but it also is terrible, because the closer you get to Uncanny Valley, the more uncanny that fucker gets.
Yeah.
You know, so you are like doing VR and you're playing Borderlands or something. You're like, well, it's still like, it doesn't feel as good because we're not really running, or the movement doesn't feel. And I don't know how they're going to fix that, but I got to tell you guys, No Man's Sky in VR is beyond mind blowing. It's something that is so difficult to describe until I have friends come over, and I've had friends come over and they put the headset on and went and bought the headset like instantly. They're like, are you fucking kidding me? So
that is the thing. It's like whenever you watch like the meta presentations and they're talking about VR, you just can't relay what it is or how it feels in a presentation. You have to actually do it. And that's very true for VR. It's just, you can't, MKBHD, the YouTuber, who he actually just took his cell phone and took a video of his cell phone going through the VR. And so he could show like what it looked like. And in the what they were trying to show in the meta presentation is like, you can have these virtual screens all around you. And he showed the virtual screens, and it was like that 10-second video was better than their entire presentation, and illustrated what it did way more,
It's crazy no one thought of doing something like that, but like more polished.
Well, we see it with E3s, right? You'll see somebody be like, Sony and Microsoft are terrible for this. Microsoft with the coveted fucking rain suit moment where they had everybody wear raincoats for the Kinect, and you were just sitting there going like, Microsoft, man, like, how dumb are you? Like, you have to pay people to be this stupid. And I love Microsoft, but they're idiots. Sony's like, buy another or get another job to play for a PS3. These companies don't really get. They pretend to get the consumer, but it takes a very particular person to get the consumer. And when you're talking to Facebook, man, you're talking to a guy who's got more money than there are people in most continents. So it's difficult for him to really come to grips with what he's trying to explain. And that's why you do need a YouTuber to be like, guys, that's not it. Like, here's what it is, and show you for 3 seconds and be all, oh, okay, now I get it. I think with VR, one of the things we're missing is weight. I play Skyrim VR, and Johnny and I've talked about this, but swinging a sword like this, because you don't have to swing it. And you'll kill everybody, by the way. Like, you can kill the maid guys by just doing that, and you're like, all right, well, that's not working. But we are getting there, and I work out all the time, and I can tell you, I don't know if I want to carry a broadsword in a video game. Right? I'm going to be like, dude, that's tiring. Like, at some point, you're just like, this. Like, that's too much.
You're going to have to bench a little first.
Yeah, you're like, oh, my max bench. All right, let's go play Skyrim. But but at the same time, guys, we're getting there, man. And I was playing D&D in VR chat, and this is going to bring us back to audio. That's probably the main thing, is audio for me. And I know people, watching are always about the looks, but I got to tell you, Fallout 4, there was a guy on the second story, and he was firing, and I turned my head, realizing like I was trying to get my ear closer to the sound, and I realized where he was above me, and it was that full-on shiver moment of like, oh shit, I know exactly where he is, and it changes that experience, the presence, they say. By the way, if you guys want a good experience in VR, Resident Evil 7 is another one.
I've heard great things.
It's the sense of presence is haunting. Like the chick gets in your face, and it's a horror. It's a game. What the hell? I don't get scared in most games. I was like, what the fuck? This chick won't get out of my face. It was so good. It's so good. And the audio, you can hear her breathing. And it's here, and then it's moving, and you're just like, this might be real. There might be an old lady in my house right now. Like your brain is that close.
No, that's awesome.
I think we're so close, man, for all of this stuff. It feels like we're it feels like we're really close to finally figuring this stuff out. Look at PlayStation finally with the Tempest. Microsoft admittedly does have their own audio system for 3D audio, but Tempest works pretty well on the PlayStation 5 as well. Yeah. We're seeing these companies care about audio and care about 3D audio, which, we've seen those games, right? Where you're just like, that guy is right in front of me. I can't hear him, or he sounds like he's in front of me. And then you come over the hill and he's 8 miles away and you're like, oh, come on. We're getting there, man. That was just a long diatribe about how excited I am about video games.
No, it's very welcome.
It's such a cool time, man. And I got to say, Borderlands, by the way, to give you guys a kudo, I have Neura headphones. A lot of people don't have these, but the Neura headphones are spectacular. And I was playing Borderlands, spooling up a couple of the guns. And I got to say, if anybody has a chance to rent Neuras, because you can rent them, rent those sons of bitches and play Borderlands. Because, my God, it is good audio. Like, that was one of the times where I was just like, holy shit. And I like Borderlands 2 better than 3. I'm not quite sure why. I don't mean audio. I mean as a game.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people say that.
Have you? Yeah, I've never really been able to parse out why, because to me, they're like Borderlands games. You know what I mean?
It's also a thing of the times. Like, when you played Borderlands 2, it was like, it kind of clicks, the butt jokes, all this stuff. And then like Borderlands 3, it's a little bit like you kind of have done it before.
Oh, okay.
It is.
I gotcha.
It is like more of the same that you love, but it just never hits like that first.
Not quite as novel. I think is kind of what you're
right. Also, Borderlands is so cool because cell shaded. Like, I like cell shaded, but it doesn't always work. And I think the one thing with Borderlands is it does and it's probably not even called cell shaded. I'll call it that.
It's not cell shaded.
Exactly. Exactly. Don't. Because I'm sure somebody right now is like,
don't say that to a visual artist.
Yeah.
Upset.
But everybody, by the way, knows what I mean when I sell. Like, normal gamers call it cell shaded. It is not. It's just like art, anime and cartoons. Don't call them cartoons, even though I do.
So help me out. Why is it not cell shaded?
Well,
what's the distinction?
Yeah. Cell shading is more of a rendering style, from what I understand.
Okay.
And what we do is it's more of an art style. It's actually things are being inked by artists and things like that. But we'll never get over people saying it's cell shaded.
So it's not like a post effect, like a
No, exactly. It's not like a post effect or anything.
Yeah. Okay.
And you worked. So when Borderlands was first announced, it was real with that artistic style was not there. Yeah, I still have pictures of that
realistic art style. Yeah.
Oh,
I think that was the and there's actually on YouTube. I don't know how it got there, but there's video of it. But
I was not aware.
Yeah, but the art style change was pivotal for the franchise. There's no way it would have been the same. I feel like, or the popularity of it would have been the same. I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the pinata of colors. Whenever like weapons are coming out, that's not going to look. In fact, you guys get away with comedic stuff because it does look, admittedly, in that vein, and that's exactly like you said.
It changed the whole tone of everything.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. And by the way, I also think Borderlands wouldn't be Tales from the Borderlands probably wouldn't be a thing if you guys hadn't chosen that, because then it's easier to just say, okay, I mean, it fits perfectly. You're just like,
Yeah.
that works. And I'm not 100% sure it would have worked as well if you guys had gone gritty. I personally think it was, yeah, like you said, like
Pretty genius.
yeah, because
idea.
well,
Yeah.
it's its own thing, and we see it with
Yeah.
some games. They try it certain graphical effects, but that one in particular, I guess you're right, Johnny. I hadn't thought about that. Borderlands being Borderlands simply because of the time frame I played it, but that is probably what caught me. Is just because it was so different. It was like,
Yeah, and I think at the time it came out, every game was brown, and like
Yes.
brown and blue. Yeah.
And everybody was saying it was like a meme, at that time, where every game had that gritty. And Borderlands 1 still had a little bit of that gritty kind of brownie kind of texture everywhere, but the fact that they changed the art style to be much more colorful and everything, like it did make it stand out in a way that was probably a little bit more refreshing to people. I would say it certainly stood out to me when I wasn't working on it, and when I saw it in person during my interview, and like
Right.
my friend was trying to get me hired at Gearbox, and I was like kind of uncertain about it, even though I thought Borderlands seemed kind of cool. But when he pulled me into his office and he showed me the intro to Borderlands 1 that was finished like 3 months before it came out, and the that song, Ain't No Rest for the Wicked, came on, and it just felt like nothing is like this right now. And so that convinced me to take the job essentially.
Oh, interesting. It's so cool too when we look at this pivotal art change on something being such a big deal, because Borderlands isn't just Borderlands, it's also any other game that comes after Borderlands. That's one of the things I think people forget is, yeah, you guys made a pivotal change, so it helped Borderlands, but it also helped other companies that got an inspiration. And we have YouTube channels that were just Borderlands. So obviously that's a creator who might not have ever become a YouTube creator, but they liked Borderlands. Right. We see that with Skyrim. And that's one of the things that, like I said, I try to, it's not even skewing positive. It's just the fact that I don't think people get it. Man, I mean, it's almost like sitting in the middle of it and being like, yeah, it's good. It's like, no, you have no clue what's going on. I mean, 90% of YouTube is video game content or music content starting it. That's what started it. That there's a reason why PewDiePie was so big. It was video game content, and it was people experiencing video game content through a goofball. Whether you liked him or not, you were seeing these games. People are not understanding that the people who are making movies are game fans. The people who are making games are movie fans. But it's all coming together into this amazing time where AI, AR, what have you, amazing audio. There isn't a part of games that I feel is being held back, which I will personally say when I was younger, I always felt voice was held back. That was the one. Things weren't voice acted. And I got to admit, I'm not going to play a JRPG where the character says one word and it's a paragraph of writing afterwards, where they're like, and you're like, and I'm like, no, Johnny knows me, man. They've been talking about games. I'm like, F you, never playing. I'm done. We're past that. Use AI if you have to. I'd be okay. Use a text reader, which I'm reviewing a game right now that uses Microsoft's text reader. And, it's not as good as Ivana or some of the others, but it's good enough. I used to think it was audio. For the longest period of time, it just wasn't, it wasn't exactly where it was supposed to be. And now, I mean, Trent Reznor did, Quake. That might be where it started, but it's so fucking awesome. It's awesome that I can talk to you guys and not to be rude to you guys. I want to make sure this is not in no way rude, but that people are interested. Because I think years ago, it might have been a Next Generation magazine article that people bought because it was Doom. They weren't buying it to talk to and now we can talk to composers and audio people, and people are genuinely able to take it in and be like, holy Christ, I didn't know that this or this thing is how they do things.
And finally, names are starting to be recognizable. Like, oh, I know you from the OST. Like we talked about. Some people really liked Outer Worlds, and now they know the name of,
Justin Bell.
Just kind of. Justin Bell, it just sticks with you in a way that it didn't before. People are just more aware of it.
As fans, as people who work on games, do you guys play games as much, or have you noticed that going down? Like Brandon, since you're the younger, were you playing a ton of games, and then has that gone down, or were you not playing as much and it's gone up? Has anything changed now that you're in the industry?
It's always kind of wavered, even before I was in the industry. Some months I'll be playing a lot, other months I'll be playing less.
Oh, interesting.
Since I'm since I've entered the industry, it hasn't really affected my passion for it too much, I would say. Actually, surprisingly.
Yeah, were you a little worried making your passion your job kind of thing?
I was actually worried because a lot of people, some people do actually see that go down and see they sometimes people feel burnt out depending on where they're working, what they're working on,
Right.
etc. And they do see that go down, but I haven't really felt that. It's I would say the majority of it's due to the fantastic people I work with and the fantastic stuff we work on. Is that
I know Josh is
I
like,
don't
that's
yeah.
me he's talking about.
Yeah.
Who?
Yeah, you should feel proud, Josh. Yeah, no, I don't really feel burnt out that way. Like I played Apex Legends last night. I love Apex. So
it's a fucking awesome game is why you love
it. Yeah.
What about you, Josh? Gone up, gone down?
I think the only thing about it hasn't really gone up or down in any particular way, but I am a lot more picky about like
that's the other thing. Yeah.
I get, well, things will come out and I see like the time investment it's going to be, and I'm like, okay, is this going to be worth my time? I try to, do my side music project a lot in my free time. So like if a game is going to take up my time, I want to make sure that it's really, really worth it. I mean, I downloaded God of War. I'm definitely going to be playing that this weekend, but yeah, I'm pretty picky about starting up games because I feel like I've played so many that it'll feel like sometimes I'm playing the same game I've already played before, wrapped in a different, a different package or something like that. Like, I think we talked about Elden Ring, but I think one thing I did like about Elden Ring wasn't necessarily, whatever the combat or gameplay, but I thought I was like, oh, I think this is going to be a moment for world design, open world design to change in the future, and that's exciting to me, like, because I could say stuff that's every other YouTuber has said a million times before about open world games, but I do love those little moments where you have that aha, whoa, oh wow, that's different, and like whenever I played Cyberpunk 2077, actually I bought a 3090. I'm like, I'm gonna get ready for this, and I got a new TV set up and everything, and even though we all know what happened there, that was one of those moments too where I felt the graphical leap in fidelity in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time in games. Like I remember Gran Turismo 3 coming out, and that was like everybody remembers that being like a touchstone. And whenever Cyberpunk 2077 came out, like I know that it had its troubles, and all that shit, which sucks. But man, it blew my mind how good it looked. Like, and just the atmosphere was enough to keep me playing and everything like that.
Yeah, I'll just shut up.
But yeah, I'm a little bit picky. I played some Cult of the Lamb, but I have this problem where I just don't finish anything. So I'm cynical on myself as well.
Yeah, I felt like the same thing. I'm a lot more picky and more akin to valuing novelty, I suppose, is what you're speaking to, Josh. And I also have the problem of the typical Steam problem of I have like 1,000 games and I finished maybe like a handful of them because I see a new shiny object and I go play that for like 20 hours and then I jump to another thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm and people tease me for being unemotional, and I guess it is pretty true. I don't have any emotional connection to anything I've ever purchased ever. Mm-hmm. So I delete a lot of stuff from my library. I hide a lot of stuff. I don't know what a backlog is because I have no guilt over any prior thing. I do get where people are coming from, and I get the idea of, I also don't humble bundle. I've never purchased a humble bundle because I don't want all those games. I want one game in that group. So to me, humble bundle makes no sense. Even if I'll get extra games, I'm like, but those don't enter. I'm not a collector in that way. But I definitely hear what you guys are saying, because Johnny and I talk with Absy and Reg and Silver all the time about this on the podcast, because we all have different thought processes for the library. Like some people really holding on to it. Reg and I don't hold on to anything. Like we can't even, you know, like sometimes remember, we're like, what was that game called? You know, Quiver Boy, like horrible names that aren't even close to the title. But then other people remember every single thing. And when it comes to the number of games and being unique, I definitely see why people are worried about that. But I personally, this is just me, I don't worry because I believe that the number of games coming out is so high that there is chaff for sure. There is some kind of filter you need. But I feel that we're getting more surprise than I ever got because the entry to get a game made is much lower than it used to be.
Yeah.
And so
I love that. I
do too.
A lot of indie games.
And there's something about it. And admittedly, you know, I diss on a lot of things, but I've seen some AAA companies take some risks I wasn't expecting in the last couple of years where I'm like, well, that's an odd game. Or EA gets a lot of shit, but EA does a ton of indie support. A ton of indie support. Like we joke, I always tease EA, and then I look at like Origins or not, or is that them? Yeah. And I'll be like, oh, okay, well, there's actually a lot of indie games on there that they've supported. So we get all this stuff. We do need a filter, which I definitely agree with. But it's also this amazing time where Cult of the Lamb can come out 1 week.
Yeah.
And then an Assassin's Creed. And if you like that, I had one of my friends was like, oh man, it's too big. And I'm like, are we there? Are we really going to complain? Because to me, I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I'm there yet. I don't think I'm quite to the point of complaining about a game size yet.
It being too big. Because I know you actually seem to love Valhalla from what I've seen.
I had a lot of tech issues and I didn't give it a buy because of those and because I didn't enjoy the story. I think Odyssey, I really just liked everything that came together. Odyssey's probably of the new ones is like something about it. But I love the voice actor. I'm a voice actor. You can sell me.
Oh yeah, Cassandra. Was it Cassandra? Character?
Yeah, but in Valhalla, Canute, who he plays Canute in Last Kingdom, and he's like one of my favorite actors of all time. So I seeing him in that. Richard Schiff, who's from West Wing, is in Ragnarok as well as Odin, and he's phenomenal. He's mind blowing, and he would have never done it if his son hadn't been in the car when they called him. Because he's like, he hates games. He's like, what the fuck's a game? And he's like, do you know what this God of War is? And his son's like, Dad, say yes. No matter what it is, say you want to be in God of War. And so Richard was like, all right, I'll be in God of War. And it's, without him as Odin, I can tell you, I would have been less on that game.
It's a surreal experience to hear, you know,
Toby from West Wing
pop up. I'm like,
oh, dude, it's so good. They're all good. And that's the other thing is like voice actors can be actor. It's not just voice. I mean, there's sort of a cartel, or there used to be, of voice actors where I knew even the AI, when I reviewed The Last of Us using AI, the AI called, what's his name from The Last of Us? Troy Baker. Instead of saying Troy Baker played Joel, it said Joel played as Troy Baker. That's how many times we see Troy Baker show up. So the ability to see actors come in, and nothing against Troy Baker. What I'm saying is the ability for a Richard to go, you know what? I don't quite get it.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna step in and then elevate it to the point to where it's like, oh fuck, we're finally here. Like
that magic moment happens.
Dude, and it is. Trust me. Like, and Opie from Sons of Anarchy is Thor. And you're like, holy shit, you couldn't have more easily sold me two of my favorite actors of all time. Yeah. And it's such a good time. And then you get Cult of the Lamb, which has no voice acting and is just art for art's sake, where you're like, what the hell? This game looks like, what is going on? It's got such a weird Jesus Christ Superstar, Antichrist Superstar look to it. You know, it's a satanic mix, and you're like, oh, it's a little crunchy at times, but yeah, such a good time.
I actually have a question for you, because I watch your reviews, and I have been for years, and I guess this is sort of similar to what you asked us, but so 2 parts here. How many games did you review like last year in total? Do you know?
Yeah, I can check.
Was it at 100, or was it like, it probably wasn't that much, right?
Less,
yeah. But so, I mean, you asked us if we get tired of games, but I mean, you're the guy that's like playing them all the time, and I'm guessing you play most of them to completion, right?
Yeah, 99% to completion, unless they can't be completed. You know, you get football game can't be completed, or a tech issue.
How do you keep your passion up for games yourself?
Because I fucking love games.
Yeah. Well, I've noted,
loved,
that's the thing. Is like you were talking about all these other negative YouTubers out there, and I know negativity drives engagement, unfortunately, but you've never been that way, which is pretty admirable.
Dude, I love my curiosity for games. I was telling Johnny a couple weeks ago, I was reviewing a game and on a different screen had a different game playing and had a magazine in front of me how to program games. And I was still trying to find more data. I don't think my curiosity for games will ever go away. I think it's actually grown to be unacceptably high. But for example, you know, the walk for Valhalla took about 200 hours to do because I wanted to make sure I knew what I was talking about when I talk about Vikings, bog steels, and stuff like that. I was like, because I don't like I don't have any issues with the let's talk about world building. But mine are more like let's talk about did Ubisoft do a good job with Vikings? And that's something nobody does except for maybe a History Channel. So I'm like, that'll be cool, and I like to do that. No, dude, it's like if I could review 100,000 games, I would review 100,000 games.
Gotcha.
I don't. I love games, even the games that suck. I love because I've seen people say, and this came up a couple weeks ago with Gotham Knights. People are like, Gotham Knights is the worst thing ever. It made me cry omega tears. And I'm sitting there going like, then you have played 0 games in 2002. You have played 0 games. You should never, ever talk about games again. And it's happened prior with other times where they're like, this is the worst game I've ever played. And I'm like, well, then you can't possibly have played very many games because there are truly, truly bad games. And I'm not saying that you can't say that, but you should give. What I notice is people they want to hyperbolize everything and they never want to give.
Of course.
They never want to give a line of understanding. I'm more like, of the games I've played, which include blah, 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 this game is worse. Well, then, okay. You can garner something from it. I've been negative on games that I think maybe a little too negative at times, and I've probably been too positive on games, but I also do believe that you should never do a review unless you know. And I've also seen people do that, where they're like, well, you know, I might change my mind. And I'm like, well, then why are you doing a review? Like, if I can't tell you what I think of a game after 40 hours, something's wrong with me, not with you. Like that's, I'm not doing, I shouldn't even do a review. And I have no issue with somebody saying impressions because that's what they're doing. There have been games that I haven't been able to beat not because of time. That's a sort of a myth. I like to destroy myths, by the way. You will hear me saying that a lot. Myths about like embargo time for reviews. Nah. Fuck you, man. I played State of Decay 2, which was available 2 weeks prior to release, and it wasn't a great game. So it's like the idea that you're holding review title times right up until the date because it's a bad game. It's not always true. So there's certain things I like to sort of debunk as myths, and one of them is also the rush to review. There's been very few games where I'm not like, I can comfortably beat this. What I can say is I'll work weekends. That is one thing. That I will say I will do, and I'll play normally on a game that I enjoy. I'll play 30 hours in a row without stopping, like many times. So I just won't go to sleep if I love a game. It's not a review game. I'm just enjoying myself. Star Trek Online I played for 64 hours because I was really enjoying Star Trek Online. Like then I wouldn't play it for a month.
That's what I was going to ask next. Actually, was like how do you feel? I guess you already answered it, but I was curious how you feel relaxed having to, do this for a living and make sure you get a good review out, play the whole thing, come up with some analysis. Like, I guess if you're just enjoying yourself the whole time, like then...
And I review it like I'm talking to a friend. One of my friends, Josh, I would drop weird Peter North jokes to him when he was sitting next to me. So I literally, when I record, I don't use a script. I'm just like, sup everybody, this character with ACG, blah, 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 blah. And then I'll cut out if I go too long. But to me, what matters is that even if you don't like it, you can learn something from it. I always tease Alekine's Gun or 7 Days to Die console edition, which should never have been released. Some of these games where I'm like, this is unacceptable. What I get from it is that I have a baseline for what unacceptable truly is. And then also because I review on cost, there is no number I have to worry about. So if somebody says, hey, you rated this an 8.5 and this a 9, what does that mean? Well, that's a valid question. That's a valid question. What does that mean? But for me, where I'm like, I also buy every game. And I'm going to tell you right now, I know people will this is what I studied, consumer psychology. It does matter.
Yeah.
It does. And
Yeah.
anybody who tries to tell you it doesn't are trying to really tell you that they don't want to, or that they believe that they've fixed it, but neither are technically true. It does matter. And so when I buy games, I'll buy a code because I get a code.
Right.
So I'll just be like, okay, I'm going to buy a code, give it away to a patron. I do think that matters because it's your money. Even if you, so whatever your psychology may be, maybe you hold it under more standards because you paid, or maybe your money's easy, that it comes to you easy. And as long as you're sort of consistent on that, it's fine. And I think that's why my curiosity doesn't go away, because I do invest in it. I'm not getting things for free. When I review headsets for VR, I buy them. I don't, if they give me Reverb, HP gave me a headset, and I stated I will not review it unless I can give it back. I do not want you to give me the headset because I want to buy it. And they were like, okay, that works for us.
Hey, I'm sure they didn't mind.
I think that's what you should do. I think we can all agree that a birthday present feels different than if you buy it yourself.
Yeah.
Whether it can be less or more, it doesn't really matter as long as you understand it as a human. And consumerism and psychology, my wife's a psychologist. That's what I wanted to be. I believe that it's vital as gamers that we move forward and sort of understand what worth is, because it's easy to get negative if you get things for free. And I've talked to people who have even been like, Gene Park for Washington Post. Gene Park buys every game, and he did after he talked to me. He was like, I get what you're saying. And he's a Washington Post reviewer. And I'm not I'm not saying that's awesome on my part. I'm saying we talked about it, and he was like, oh shit.
No, there's something to it.
There is something to it.
Yeah.
And I think it does keep my curiosity alive, because if I paid $5 for a small game or whatever, it's still $5. And I'm like, I'm looking at it going like, did I get $5 out of this? And I can tell you there are games like like maybe that I liked that other people didn't, where I'm like, I still felt like I got my money out of it.
What do you think about Xbox Game Pass and that if we're going to be on that subject?
I think it's fucking amazing. And I also am not a person who worries about 100 years in the future. So right now, the way that they're doing things is phenomenal. I had to scrimp and do deals with my parents to wash cars to get $60 to buy Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yes.
Right. By the way, I have a receipt for Ghouls and Ghosts, $59.99. So if people try to tell you prices have changed or blah, 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 I've got receipts that state they've been expensive for a long time.
Right.
Dude, it's awesome. It's awesome because I have bought so many games I wouldn't have got because of Game Pass. I am a purchaser, by the way. So if I like a game, I worry a little bit they might remove it. I like the game. My save game is tangible. It matters. So I'll be like, okay, I'll buy this game because they might remove it. I think Game Pass is phenomenal. And all the developers I've talked to, except yesterday I did see the big news that the guy for GTA said it didn't fit them. And I'm like, right, nothing fits you. You're GTA. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like Facebook guy trying to sell you a headset. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't fit them. But I love it, dude. And I love it because there are games that we have talked about in the podcast where somebody's like, what? Like, I've never even heard of this game. And I'm like, dude, you just it's on Game Pass. Check it out. And for now, it's great. I do get people's, I don't know what the term would be, worry. Johnny and I've talked about this hundreds of times. Like, do you worry? But how much worry? Right. How much worry should a consumer have? That's another thing. How much worry do we need to carry forward as like a moral versus just like this is the way it's currently occurring? And
I'll say this. I think, and I don't have, this is just a hypothesis, but I don't have any data to back it up. But I do think there's a possibility that it's going to influence a lot of developers.
The making of games.
Yeah, to not have to feel like they have to cram features into a product just to make it justify, like the price point justifiable. I wouldn't be shocked. I don't have any proof that's occurring, but I can sense that, if someone's going to have the intention of having Microsoft, pay them to put it on Game Pass and everything like that, then they can be like, okay, let's just streamline these things and make it this good and not bloat the game with features. I think that's one thing that we see with $60, $70 titles now, is there's this pressure on developers to really, really make it worth that. And
the buffet gameplay, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that'll be very good for games, because I like, for example, my favorite game of like a couple years ago was Hades. I played the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And It was what, a $15 game, and I got so many hours of entertainment out of it. And it's not a bloated game. It just someone says it's not very long, but has a lot of girth.
yeah, exactly. Girth is what matters.
Yeah. So, but like, it's a very streamlined experience. It does a handful of things very well, and it has replayability and everything like that. And so, I don't know. I think as a developer and consumer, I appreciate games that are just doing the thing that they need to do a lot more these days.
Well, I talked about it in a game I reviewed. I'm not even going to mention the title. It wasn't a bad game, but I was stating that it is like some games are like the biggest buffet ever, where everybody forgot the salt. So you get 45 versions of chicken.
My God.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were responding going like, holy shit, I actually get what you're like. That is exactly what these games are now. And you get games that do it well, and you get games that that it just feels like it's there. And then you get games that are surprisingly nuanced in their ideas that don't necessarily come perfectly together. For example, the Nemesis system in Shadow of War. However, the one problem I do have with these fucking companies is that they patent everything. And those bastards patented the Nemesis system.
I didn't realize that.
Yes. So Ubisoft had cultists in one of their games. They had each of their game has this group of people that you go and investigate. Odyssey, Origins, and Valhalla all have.
And it was
this.
I remember that. It was similar to the cult system.
And they had to watch out. That bothers me. This patented bullshit, that bothers me. That is every play ever written uses the word the. You don't patent the word the. And that really infuriates me, because that idea was Nemesis system was like, okay, imagine a racing game where this is to the nth degree, where you have these different racers and you bumped into them a couple times, and companies have tried, but they actually have to steer clear of this actual patent. And they've told me those words. They're like, we had to make sure we didn't do this and this and this and this, because this patent is so wide that it encompasses pretty much any antagonist system. That kind of stuff, when you see me get mad, I won't usually get mad at a game, mostly.
Yeah.
But what I will get mad at is when companies try to... You fucked up because you failed you failed actual gaming by doing that. You didn't just protect yourself, because guess what? Where's the next Shadow of War? There isn't one. Because you guys also fucked up and put a bunch of microtransactions in your last game. And your last game had so many issues, people basically had to buy their way into, and the Nemesis system was in there. So you failed everybody. Your second game wasn't as good, and you had the Nemesis system in there, and you're stopping other people from moving that forward. That kind of stuff is what will, it's one of the few times where you'll see me get really hot on something, is when you see a company artificially hold something back, and you're just like, I don't get it. Why would you ever think that was a good idea? Because if your competitor does a good job with something, then you can go, wow, I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah. Now we can do, but it's this, it really is this feeling of inadequacy you can tell from these companies. They feel there's a worry of inadequacy.
It's weird, because it's like a genre convention, like you wouldn't do that with a song or music, you know?
Can you imagine fucking IPing a certain kind of, trap beat or something? You'd be like, what? Now, of course you can say that you're copying somebody if it's all the same, but music is infinite variables. It's math. And the same thing goes for games. You could say, I'm going to copy the Nemesis system perfectly, but if it's in your game, it's already different, because your enemies are different, their setups are different, your status effects might be different. But instead, the big, I mean, I'm not even a big company hater, but in that particular element, I very much am. Where I'm very sad that idea was effectively neutered. Where we could have seen Gotham Knights, for instance, a game I don't hate but I didn't love. We could have seen Gotham Knights try something like, because who knows if they're like, hey, we can't do Batman perfectly, but you know what? Let's have some street thugs get stronger as we defeat him. What if Batgirl defeats a thug in a certain way to where it's harder for Batgirl to fight him the next time? So now Nightwing is the character we switch to. Then you have engaged gamers into the idea of flexibly adjusting the way they play, so that they're invested in different characters. Instead of saying, I only like Nightwing, you could say, well, I like Nightwing, but Red Hood's got to take this fucker on because Nightwing beat him up and lost. and now he knows how to fight. And instead, they're just like, no, we're gonna IP. Sorry, I'm just gonna go off on this for an hour.
I mean, it was a great system. That's for sure.
It was, and
yeah, the idea is awesome.
Yeah,
just the ability to make stories on the fly like that are fantastic and have player involvement.
And we do see that, right, with the organic story. I mean, I'll never bitch about a lot of Ubisoft games because regardless of, towers, Jesus, or whatever they may do, there is a lot of times where I'll be talking to a friend and I'll be like, did you remember this tower in Far Cry Primal? And they're like, yeah, the guy pees on your head when you're trying to attack him. And I'm like, yeah. And then we remember it forever. And there's something awesome about that. It's almost like telling a friend about a good book. You're like, dude, when that guy died, you're like, I know. And then when you're playing a game, sometimes that guy didn't die. And there's something magical. And that's why my curiosity will probably never go away, because there's something magical where maybe you and I got to the end of the game and saw that last cutscene, but the way that we got there and who we befriended is different. And it also leads to games not being as good too. I will say that I say it in my reviews where I'm like, listen, if you hit these story beats wrong, which can happen, this game's gonna suck. You're gonna, for example, God of War Ragnarok is that way. There's a center part that is very slow, and if you hit it a certain way, you're gonna. And I already in my Discord, people are like, "Whoa, this is glacial," and I'm like, "Whoops, they hit it. They went on this one side quest." Which takes just a little, so you get that, but still, I'm okay with that threat. I'm okay with that risk.
There was this one point when I was playing the first God of War, where there was a little bit of it was as perfectly as it was done. There was a little bit of this Ludo narrative dissonance moment, where Atreus, that's the name of the kid, right?
Yeah.
He found out that he was a god, and he started to get cocky. And he was going through that little moment where he started getting really cocky and asshole-ish for a little bit. Yeah. And then I went on a side quest and he was a normal again for that side quest.
Ooh, no. Dude, really? I never even thought about that.
Yeah, he was just like chill. He was back to being kind of chill. And then I went back to the main story. He was back to being a cocky asshole for a little bit.
Dude, that's blowing my mind because I never thought about that. That could happen. By the way, I don't want to hold you guys too long. Are you good for time?
Yeah, we're good.
Another thing I want to talk about with AI. I'm a big fan of Halo AI. I think most people are. You get fake AI and real AI. You have Fear, which has good fake AI. You have Halo, which has good AI. Then you get Ubisoft games where you're throwing rocks at their heads and they say it's the wind. I will say that is one place where I'm hoping we see some really good improvements is AI. We see it in Ragnarok where a lot of the bad guys are monsters because that's easier to have a dumb monster than a dumb human, and it pays off. And by the way, I'm probably going to replay God of War now because of what you just said. I got to swing back to that. What you just said, I didn't pick up on that, and now I'm so interested in it. My brain is thinking about that idea. Do you remember the quest real quick? Do you remember, was it about halfway through God of War that this happened?
I think so. Yeah,
okay.
That was at that turning point where he finds out he's a god, and things start to pick up a little bit.
That's invigorating to me because I love to go back and see that kind of stuff and be like, holy shit, that happened. But what I was saying about AI is you get that dissonance as well. Ubisoft games in particular, I guess it was the wind, and you're like, dude, come on. I'm standing right here. I just shivved 5 of your friends and they're dead in front of you. What are you doing? I am really excited about AI and how they might change that up. And I don't know if you guys have had a chance to play a game that I think comes very close, and it's by developers that this is expected, Weird West. Did you guys play Weird West?
No, but I know someone who worked on it.
Yeah, I have not played it, but I actually met the guy who did the sound design for it.
Dude. By the way, speaking of sound design, some of the best menu sounds.
Oh my God.
The satisfaction.
Yes, the satisfaction.
When you move around. Palpable.
It's orgasmic, man. Sorry, we're getting a little weird. Here's
I'll make sure to let them know that y'all like it.
Yeah. Here's why Weird West rocks. The patrols for the enemies are not only super long, 10, 20 minutes, meaning that they don't just go in a circle. They move around. But if you open a door, they'll go in and investigate the door and then change the entire patrol route. And you can lock them in rooms. You can do all this crazy stuff. And it felt, I was paying attention. Where I'm going to be honest, man, I like a lot of games from a lot of companies. 99% I'm not paying attention because it's very easy to game the AI. You just, you're like, rock over there, go over here. And
dude, it's almost like a verbal contract with the devs
of lying to yourself,
listen,
right? I get it.
Like
I'm going to lie to myself. Yeah.
An expectation that the guards are going to behave in a certain way.
Right.
And if they don't, if they're suddenly smarter or more human than that, you're thrown off. Like, whoa, what is this? No.
But in a good way. West Wing, Wing, sorry. Weird West. I was thrown off in one of those. I remember it was about 9 at night, 2 days prior to the review, and I was getting ready for bed, and then it was 9 at night the next night, and I hadn't turned it off. Because I noticed this, and I was like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to sleep. Like, this is awesome. Because I was, yes, and it caused me to test it for hours, going like, shut the door, and they can't, and lock it, and throw away the key, and they can't get out. I'm like, this is the greatest thing of all time. Why has nobody thought it? And of course, it's Arcane, one of the Arcane founders. Right. So they know their shit, right? We've obviously we've seen them do this. Something Thief failed at as well. Thief 2014 failed at that. But I think AI is coming along to where they'll still be gamified, which is fine. It makes a gamer feel powerful, and otherwise it could be really difficult if you had the AI just doggedly after you for 24 hours. You'd be like, dude, I'm tired. Yeah. Like, leave me alone. But I think that is one of the things I'm really excited about as well, is where AI, and I don't mean artificial intelligence online, but I mean in the games, where these guys are starting to do things. Because Halo, I still remember the first time I played Halo, and really understanding what these characters were doing. You could get some to retreat, and it felt so good because they'd be like, the devil is here, the devil is here. And you're like, you're right, bitch, I'm here. And you felt monstrous. You were like, I am the bad guy to them. And that's why that's why that AI sold itself so well. And we've seen some small adjustments here or there, but I'm really excited for AI to see some, still gamified, but see some improvements in their interactivity. And
I think introducing little human elements to it, because some people tend to think good AI means they're just good at killing you. But that's not necessary, because you could give AI perfect information of where you are, and they'll just
look at Alien
you,
Isolation, right, Johnny? Alien Isolation has 2 AIs. And one of the AIs lies to the other AI and says where the human is, and it's lying.
Gives them perfect information. So
I thought that was ingenious when I read that. I was just like, that's...
Wow.
Yes. So it's got 2 AIs.
That's awesome.
One AI knows where the human is all the time and lies to the alien AI so that it hints. And the alien AI is consistently guessing if it's right or not. And the same thing happened in Fear. A lot of people think Fear's AI is good. It's actually quite terrible. But what the AI does in Fear that no one expected is the AI will make a choice in Fear, and then prior to moving will tell another AI what it's going to do, and that AI will then suggest the move out verbally. So you'll hear a guy say, flank him. It's already chosen to flank him. It said, I'm going to flank, tells the other AI that they're going to do it, then that AI says it out loud, making you feel like teamwork has occurred. It is ingenious, as in like
that's cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I was just reading it going like, dude, that's
right.
Because I'm doing a video right now called Lie a Little to basically it's about like lying a little to the gamer and we'll eat it up. You just have to lie a little bit to a gamer. You don't have to prove everything. And I think that shows right there that a little bit of lie goes a long ways to feeling the softness, where sometimes you get AI that doesn't feel soft. It feels very restricted and very rigid.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Now I want to play Alien Isolation. I've been sleeping on, that one for a while.
Man, it's been forever since I played that. I gotta go back now.
It's such an intelligent way of doing, and we know AI. That's one of the reasons what Johnny was saying. Because he and I are both chess fans and stuff like that. AI can see everything. So what do? And some AIs like script it. Some AIs have various different like strategies that they employ. But the idea of lying to your
imperfect
information and lying to the other one and is just like, oh, that makes
it is fascinating.
Perfect sense.
The other stuff too is like the fact that the guard recognizes Charlie, who is now unconscious on the ground, and has some kind of specific reaction to that. That'd be cool.
They Live, well, or not They Live. The Last of Us does that. Every animal and person has a name.
Yeah, and you notice that a lot, because all of a sudden there's, whoa, okay.
Where's Johnny? Johnny, where are you?
I took down one of their guys. It kind of sinks. And I think that's a really big deal. Yeah, like human stuff. Or like, oh, that guy had to go take a piss to and he broke his patrol because of small little kind of random things.
Yeah. I think also you guys have a different style of game with Borderlands where, you're also looking at levels, all this kind of stuff, as well as weapons that they may have. But I think that people get caught up too in wanting better AI for everything. And I actually don't agree with that also. So for example, God of War, a lot of them are monsters, and your bosses are usually the Valkyries or something humanly intelligent, and I buy on that. I'm like, okay, I get it. And in fact, if you look at history, myths, the great heroes did fight a bunch of monsters. So to me, I'm just like, fits perfectly for that game. Borderlands, it fits perfectly that some enemies are going to be smart, some are going to be psychos, some are going to be the dogs or whatever, where they're not super intelligent, and you're going to get these kind of things. I also want to make sure that companies don't try to put too much into their AI, because then you can get that game where you're like, even a
why
small
is this
amount.
Dog?
Yeah, why is this? Dogs are smart though, technically.
Outsmarting me.
Yeah. If it's a bloodhound, you're screwed, right? Like no matter. But I want to make sure people listening don't think I want that for everything, but because I don't. I think in fact that could make it terrible. A game like Borderlands isn't built on that. A game like Borderlands, I think, is communal killing.
You could use that to build.
Go ahead, Johnny.
You could use that to build contrast, because what if a lot of your enemies that you're facing are psychos or whatever, but then when you run into that one smart son of a gun that's like outmaneuvering you and stuff, that stands out, and that's a memorable team fight right there.
And I think it stands out. I was talking when I did the Walking the Walk for Mad Max, I was trying to explain to people why I think Mad Max is one of the best games I've ever played. And I was explaining that in Mad Max, you start out as the victim. You can get, but by the end of that game, I was literally waiting on the sand dunes in my car for bad guys to show up so I could hunt them down. I had become the hunter. And that is, in some games, that happens, but a lot of times you're going into bases to do that. And this, I was literally waiting. I was the one waiting, which in most games, the enemy's waiting.
You're doing the hunting thing again. You were glassing.
And I was glassing. I was scoping. Remember? Yeah. When I said that, I remember your eyes going like, dude, that's a perfect term. But that is what you're doing, is you're glassing the hill for that enemy. And you get the AI that does shake it up a little bit. And there's such a good feeling when a game hits just right. And you get that enemy. And we talked about this with God of War. I think Ragnarok, one big problem with Ragnarok that a lot of games have is that you can tell when a boss battle is going to happen because you go into a bull depression. You always know.
It's a circular.
Yeah. Devil May Cry. You're like, dude, 4 tunnels are meeting in one place. Bad guys incoming.
Are you walking into a room and there's suddenly a ton of health and ammo?
Dude, yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, whenever there's a door and there's a bunch of ammo, you're like, seriously,
a save crystal.
yeah. You're like, all right, guys. You know what's funny? Okay. Some game developers have gone the way of trying to shake that up, and Remnant. Of the Ashes, which I wasn't a fan of, but because of the randomness they had, sometimes there wouldn't be health updates in some places, and I actually thought that was pretty cool. You would go in and you'd be like, haha, oh shit, and it would be a major battle, and you'd be like, we're screwed. We weren't. I think switching it up is cool too. And I also think that one of the games that's pushing things forward is Hitman 3 in particular. Hitman 3's new freelancer mode is, to see that be free is so unbelievable to me. The idea of what they've done with
style edition.
Yeah, you book flights.
Oh, really?
Dude, have you haven't seen? Go check out what they've done with Freelancer. It is mind blowing. It is basically taking all the levels from all the games, assigning factions, and having you have your own home base as the hitman with your own rooms, all this shit.
Whoa.
Going to different places, having to find different people. They have new characters on all the levels, selling weapons or items. It's a roguelike, and if you die, you go back and you lose, I think, half of your stuff, but you still have your whatever, you've killed your third guy, he's still going to be dead. There's 12 total you need to kill. But they've adjusted, and it's all free. It's a completely new game. It plays like nothing that Hitman plays prior. It's it's mind-numbing, and it shows what
incredible.
maybe they might do for their next game, which is what we had talked about. Because I think Hitman's one big issue is you can spend so much time in Hitman with exclusive contracts, taking out Nick Nolte, or no, Gary Busey, taking out Gary Busey, all this kind of crazy shit, that the story's narrative can be a little loose. You're like, you know, I'm going to this winery and taking out, where you don't really need to do that. And freelancer mode, as being free as well, shows, you know, that you can do that. I mean, freelancer also, you guys got to remember, Hitman's the only game I've ever seen where when the third game came out, you could take the weapons from the third game back into the first and second game.
Wow.
Like, they patched it. Yeah, they post-patched it, so you could take all your shit.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Like, I was just like, and that's, I'm glad they're not with who they were for publishing now, because I think that's also a big plus. I think it allows for them to sort of, you know, there's certain publishers that aren't the greatest. And I think that shows like what we can see in games now, almost like the Nemesis system, where you see these kind of things popping up where you're just like, dude, this is going to be fucking wicked. Like,
yeah.
But to get back onto your stuff before we wrap this up, Johnny, do you have any questions? Because I want to ask these guys one thing.
I want to hit you with one question that kind of I was thinking about as we were talking. It kind of seems to me there are like 3 pillars to audio in a game. Kind of like in university, you know, like how you could only focus, you had 3 things. You had health, socializing or partying, and studying.
Yeah, right.
You could only focus in
Sometimes
2 out
studying.
of the 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could, but you could only do 2. So if you're out partying at night and you're studying, your health is shit. You're not getting sleep, you know, you're not working out. Anyway, so you can juggle that, right? But in a game, you kind of have like VO, special effects, and OST. And like how you juggle those 3, you kind of have to be smart about it. You can't pump gas on all 3 at the same time, right? If you're playing Borderlands and there's banter and shots, you're not gonna have
parsing it might be difficult.
You're not gonna have like a Hans Zimmer theme with a delicate melody playing. Like, it's, you know, when you're playing Ori in the Blind Forest, the music takes the protagonism, and, you know, there isn't a VO happening. It's the music and the moment. So how do you think about in a game like Borderlands, where there's so much, you know, chatter and banter and shots the whole time? How do you think about including music in that? Is it really kind of a backdrop? Is that its natural place? You know, how do you find moments to elevate that?
Oh man, that's been a contentious mix, sort of back and forth for forever. Because in like Borderlands 2, the music was pretty hot, and I mean loud. Is what I mean.
Right.
But yeah, like and there was a lot of dialogue, and you know, we use ducking for dialogue, like duck everything whenever dialogue comes in. But at the same time, we kind of still run into the problem, and we know these issues exist, and we want to improve them and all the time, you know. But we've gone back and forth with, you know, production design and everything like that on how to make that better and make it more clear, because the human mind can only absorb so much information at once. You know, and so like sometimes I know that in Borderlands 2 especially, because we didn't have as much of a dynamic mix system in that game. We have a lot more of a dynamic mix system now, and we keep on improving dynamic mixing. But in Borderlands 2, you could easily miss a lot of story beats because, you know, all of a sudden a line of dialogue gets triggered while you ran over into a skag den and started like shooting a bunch of animals, or, you know, skags, and now the mix is just all over the place. And even if you could, like, even if the intelligibility of the audio was really good, your brain isn't processing it, right? Because you can't mind juggle that many things. Yep. So I think it comes down to designing missions a little bit differently with narrative in mind. It goes kind of back to that communication thing that I was saying earlier on with production. Like whenever we were working on Borderlands 1 and 2, it was a lot more of the wild, wild west of development back then. It was like design was over here doing this thing, and we knew about it. We knew about it kind of, you know, there's only like 3 of us. So like, and there's like 50 of them. And so like, you know, there was a whole lot of lack of communication channels and stuff. We've gotten a lot better, and we get better every day about trying to be a lot more deliberate about when you hear something or when something might be heard. In a sandboxy game like Borderlands, the player can go anywhere and do anything. So we now have a lot more mind share on those things than we used to, where it's like, okay, this could be a narrative beat up here. Let's not have a piece of dialogue play at this moment, but maybe right here instead, or oh, actually, like this would be a good time to maybe pump up the music, or so we're a lot more deliberate than we were back in the day, and it all comes down to mixing and creating better dynamic mix systems and stuff like that. I wish I could talk more about that right now, but in the future maybe.
Okay.
Brandon, do you have anything to add to that?
In addition to obviously the dynamic mix system and communication amongst the three main elements there being super important for particular moments. Just as a designer, I find myself when testing particular pieces of content or systems, thinking about like, okay, well, what needs to be in the forefront here? Like, is this a musical moment? Is this like a moment where you need to get like a really crucial piece of dialogue or story to the player? So your design itself, depending on like whether or not it's part of like a larger system or more like moment specific, you tend to either punch that up with like more character or try to make it like fade into the background. You really have to like focus on how hard or soft you need to sell something so that you don't take away from any of those other elements. So it is kind of like a delicate dance, and you don't all the time get to particularly take that into account, especially if you're doing like something like, I don't know, guns or whatnot, because people are shooting stuff all the time, but maybe you get to do like maybe like third person guns from other enemies. They don't get all like the little cool little bits that you the player gets, because you want to sound cool. You don't want to hear everyone else getting the cool guns. You want the cool guns.
And we've been doing we've been doing style guides a lot more the past few years, and we basically have like a scale of like how soft or how a designer should design a sound.
Okay. Gotcha.
This needs to be. It's like, does this like what's the scale, Brandon? It's like soft to bombastic or something.
It was like basically an intensity scale, or something like reserved to bombastic, something like that.
Yeah, because as sound designers, like going back, like you always wanted to make sure that every sound was as special as possible, but like you need to actually think like, no, think about this. Does placing down a bag of sand on the table, does that need to be as
right? To be like, or
like bombastic is quite literally the worst word I've ever heard. That's why I got into reviewing. That word is why I got into reviewing.
That would be the single descriptor.
It would be for music.
Review.
I remember reading a particular website and they were like, the music is bombastic, and I was like, fuck you, I'm reviewing this game. And that's how I started reviewing. I was like, dude, the guy worked his ass off, and your exact words are bombastic. Like, seriously, you couldn't have talked about an instrument or anything? Like, come on, man, that guy worked his butt off. So that is quite literally the word that got me into reviewing.
The first time actually I had heard of you was your Battleborn review, and someone sent it around at the office, and it was like, this guy is like the first guy who actually like reviewed audio like that we've heard, and he wasn't just half-assing it. He was actually talking about the audio systems and stuff like that, and I was like, oh wow. So
my respect for Battleborn. I like that game. Why?
Rip.
I like that game. Oh, rip so much. I really enjoyed that game. It wasn't great. I really had a good time with that game.
Fun.
Oh man. Talking about like when you look at balancing and stuff for music, especially when you were talking about audio, I got to give a kudo to Ragnarok in one thing that they do, and I wish more games would do this, and I know it's difficult because it costs. Voiceover isn't cheap. But if you walk away from a character when they're talking, they'll be like, dude, what? Why are you walking away? And then you get close and they're like, as I was saying, and I'm all, it's awesome. And
does Ragnarok do that?
Yeah. And
awesome.
the dwarf does it a couple times when you walk away from the dwarf. You'll be like, dude, And yeah, I just was like, that's exactly what
That's
needs
cool,
to happen.
man.
That's
You know,
fantastic.
admittedly, understand that, you know, you are, like I was talking to Bateson, who voices Hitman, and I was talking to him about how difficult it is to do voiceovers and how much money it, you know, they don't have a lot of time for that. But those little things, again, I was talking about things joining up, mattering, and that little bit fit because the dwarves are bastards anyway. They're both really
Sassy.
casually sarcastic.
Yeah.
And so the idea of him being like, seriously? I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Because it joined everything together. And I was just like, this is perfect. But the great thing about seeing all this kind of stuff like come together, and we're starting to see it even more now, is that I personally, one of the things that I used to like is, so you buy your OST, and we know, especially after talking to Austin Wintory, I now know how difficult an OST is versus the game soundtrack because they're not the same. OST can trigger, or sorry, OST doesn't trigger, it's your track, where a game audio can trigger. And he was telling me all these secrets he had done. For example, Syndicate, he has one track where if a character has died and you're playing that level, the chick isn't singing. And if she's alive, she is singing. And I was just like, wait, what the fuck are you talking about? Like,
That's
and
cool.
he didn't tell anybody that. That's another thing.
Yeah.
I love it when somebody's like, why'd you do that? Cuz. And that's it. You just cuz. So we're getting to this time where we're starting to see music pop up in awards shows as well.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you get the big winners, which we've seen before, whether it be like a Jack Wall or even Kid has obviously won, multiple other people. But what I like is Call of Duty has always been mentioned as having really good audio. And admittedly, I can say, yeah, it does have really good audio. But there are other games out there that aren't as bombastic
There we go.
that have very good audio. And
I hate that word.
I fucking hate it. I didn't even like saying it as a joke. But what's great is we're starting to see people take, for example, It Takes Two. Had some good sound effects, especially out in the woods and hearing the, you know, the animals and stuff. Grounded, which I admittedly have not spent a ton of time in, but Grounded has some very good environmental audio.
And all the creatures.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some that are
very well done.
right. Yeah, there's some good. There's an anti-spider setting in there for a reason.
When you hear something in the back brush
Yeah.
that's coming for you're like, shit.
It's such a cool time because, like I was saying, you got Tempest on the PS3 or PS5, and you, of course, your PCs have all these sound cards. But we're starting to get all these things that matter, where it's not going to just be the big games that win. You guys are a big game too, obviously, Borderlands. But what I think is cool is we're starting to see people pay attention to like that environmental sound and how it matters and in storytelling, by the way, too. Because if you have a moment where you're near a pond and you're hearing the birds, blah, 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 that when you don't hear the birds, that's scary. Just like in real life. If you're out in the woods and suddenly you can't hear anything, you're like, Sasquatch, I'm dead. For sure. There's a UFO coming. There's something. And it's such a cool time that we're getting all of these things in that I wanted to ask you guys, have you, and I know you're saying you didn't get to play a lot of games. Environmental audio, though, is a huge deal to me. Have you guys ever noticed it in a game so far? Has there ever been a time, even, it can be a Ragnarok or something, but I mean, even in a smaller game, have you guys ever...
Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh, dude, perfect example. Damn.
Yeah.
That's the end of my question. That was a good answer. Go ahead, Brian.
I'm going to go for...
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Boom. We're done.
I'm going to go for a horror game. I really like how like the subtle creaks of the house in like Resident Evil 7 like set you off, like even when they're just like subverting your expectations. Like there might be a killer on the door, like it might be around the corner, you don't know, but like you're just hearing this creaking and I'm like, oh man, the Foley team. And
that's why I love
really
seeing more games offer the, you know, different dynamics for sound.
Oh, dude, thank God,
that's
right?
so huge, right?
Yeah.
And I know some people still don't kind of understand, but so people understand what we're saying. The difference between the loud and the quiet, make that broader so that it is a contrast when you're out in the wild and there's no sound and it's eerie, right? Versus when something bombastic is going on. Yeah.
Johnny? Yeah, dude. It's people just don't get it when you have everything set up. And I had forgot about Ghost. Jesus, Ghost was good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
with the wind, the leaves,
dude,
right? The whole.
Yes, and like in a game, let's say a shooter game, grenade goes off and you get, you get that whistle.
The tinnitus.
Dude, there's something so good about it because when that audio filters back in and it works perfectly with like your vision unblurring in a shooter game or something like that, if you get it just right, or the zip of a bullet in Arma. I'm a huge Arma fan. It's probably my favorite shooter of all time. And I was playing Arma 3, and a bullet zipped from my left to my right shoulder, and I was in real life ducking, just being like, what the fuck? Because I wasn't expecting, I never saw the enemy. And it's that zap. And if you've ever been shot at or shotguns, and you hear a bullet accidentally or on purpose go whizzing past you, it is not like the move. It's not anything like the gun. It does have a beat. It's like an angriest bee you could ever imagine zipping past you. And hearing that in a game and getting these games finally to this level, and then again, like Johnny said, finally seeing companies say, "Hey, you know what? I'm probably pronouncing the word wrong, but azimuth, the angle of the speakers, finally getting the ability, because many of us do have back speakers, and if you can't adjust that, you can have some really weird effects going on where you're like, dude, it needs to be much more narrow for my system, or much, or what have you. Starting to see these companies, and kudos to Sony again for what they've been doing and putting stuff where it matters for audio, because we're now getting, almost everybody I know has a DAC. Almost everybody I know, I run tubes, but I also have a digital. But you've got these people with all these different headsets. People are starting to get more into headsets, more into home theater. And then TVs. What we have seen for so many years is, bro, I got a 60-inch TV. Blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what are you running? Oh, I just run the television speakers. And you're like, oh,
yeah, no.
What do you do? What? And now we're getting these things where people, like when I talk to somebody about audio and I see somebody's face light up, I personally believe that one of the biggest areas for growth in games is audio fans. As in, yes, there are some fans now, but you fuckers have no idea what until you have a system, not even an expensive one, but until you put some headphones on, or you have even 4.1s or the Neura. I'm not sponsored by them. But I'm telling
you have a little badge like a
Neura. When you actually get to hear it, I think there are more people who will find stuff in games they never expected. For example, Thief 3, I remember playing that, and in Thief 3, reading about the cradle level where they had slowed down the heartbeat of the entire house is alive. So what they did was they recorded a heartbeat and then slowed it to the point to where you can't tell it's a heartbeat. But it's there to a human. There's something going on, but it's just discordant. It's uncomfortable. And the first time I heard like rats scratching along the floor or whatever, and it's not like Johnny said where they aren't worried about your dynamic range, where it's just sort of on top of it. But now you've got these where people are like, no, this matters, because if you hear this, for example, I was doing Dying Light 2 and I was in metal girders. And if anybody's ever worked around metal makes so much sound. It is one of the most uncomfortable experiences. I hauled steel for years and you can hear metal go like, and it'll stress and move under heat. And I was playing Dying Light 2 and I was up on a girder and I heard that, and I was like, oh fuck, what's happening? We have so many people who are fans of audio that don't know it. I truly do believe that that's one of the biggest places, because TVs are just now starting to sort of figure it out, and they're sort of making it a little bit more important. HDR has become its thing. I can't wait until, I don't know if they'll sell them. Selling sound systems with your TV is really confusing to people, but I just can't wait until it gets easier and easier. We start getting good sounds to where people can experience and go, oh, now I get why Thief is so scary. Because Alien Isolation is not scary if you have no sound. Or it is, but it's nowhere near as scary as if you have sound. You hear water dripping and you're like, is that like saliva from this thing? What is happening? And your brain, there's so many levels that are well beyond the visual spectrum. And I'm excited for that shit, man. Sorry.
What I tell people, like when it comes to like investing in a better setup, it's like, I think you could start with headphones. I like headphones, but I personally prefer speakers.
Me too.
You know,
right.
But I always say, like, you don't have to worry about buying everything at once, but start with a good stereo pair, just with that you really like. And there's lots of good brand. I think Klipsch is. I'm not sponsored by them, but Klipsch is a pretty good brand and affordable. Oh, you know. they're bang for the buck. I'll say that. Like, uh, but yeah, a stereo pair, and then you can add on stuff later, like if you want. But the biggest difference, because I have a Atmos 7.2 0.4 setup, and sometimes I'll just turn it off, like just to listen to the stereo pair, and that's the thing that makes the biggest difference.
Yeah.
You know, it's the thing that's carrying the room.
It gets you most of the way, doesn't it?
Exactly. And then the rest is bonus. You know, like as when I got Atmos, I thought it was going to be a lot more transformative.
Right. Yeah. I got absolutely agreed. Yeah.
But it is nice, but it's like a nice to have. It just envelops the sound around you a little more.
Yeah.
You know, because those speakers aren't doing a lot. They're really quiet. It's just a lot of little extra. And you will get more positional information, which is good. And it's especially good in a game. You'll hear an enemy behind you.
Yeah,
but what's carrying it is still the stereo pair and your sub at the end of the day. You don't really even need a sub, really. You just, because a lot of like floor standing speakers have a lot of sub already in them.
Yeah, I'm using, I have ProSonus monitors because I'm not a big fan of speakers. Monitors I sort of like because I can fuck around with them and there's no color to them. You know, you get like, if you buy a speaker, a lot of times those guys have messed around with it so much that you're like, what's happening here?
Scooped or whatever.
And one of my friends came over and I was like, I don't think you really get what a good system. Now these are a little bit more expensive. They're not super expensive, but I was like, let me show you a headphone. And I had really cheap. They're admittedly the IP that HyperX bought is from $500 headphones, so they are well above what they should be for as cheap. But I put these headphones on and I was like, just listen, because they were doing their TV, and I'm like, you don't understand, sound isolation alone, just killing a little bit of the outside room sound can, and then hearing those sounds closer to your ear. There isn't a travel. There isn't hardwood floors, which can be a bitch beyond all belief. They can really color sound in some terrible ways. And then also, at times, I sort of dig them. It just depends. But I had him put headphones on, then listen. And it was one of those moments where he's like, and this was his words. He's not really prone to hyperbole at all. But he was like, I believe I've missed 50% of the game. Yeah. I didn't realize there were all these other I heard the loud scream of this. I heard the gunshots, but the gun, and he was telling me one time, he's like, this is no lie. He's like, well, I thought because the gun is in front of you that you just hear all the sound from in front of you. So that makes sense. And I'm like, holy shit. You gotta, like, dude, you just stepped into the biggest improvement that you probably will ever imagine. Because if you've ever played a game that I'm quite impressed with, and I think I will always be impressed, was Uncharted 4. They and Gears, but Gears is known to do this, but they handled room, occlusion, bounce, all the stuff really well. And I remember going in and I fired a gun and you get the closed off sound because I was against the wall here, and then an open sound of the actual, bullet traveling, all that stuff coming over here into the wider cavern that I was in. And I was talking about it in my review, going like, guys, man, if you don't have a pair of headphones or a good theater, you're going to miss out on like 90% of why this is impressive, because the travel time for sound is so easily discernible by a human. Like that's the thing. A lot of people they just see it and it's light speed or what they think is light speed. And it's like, man, the first time you see somebody fire a gun like half a mile away and you see the flash and then you hear like, zip, you're all, wait, what? Yeah. That was like 3 seconds later. It's like, yeah, dude, you're missing out on, or how many times have we seen those movies where the explosion happens in a good I almost said bombastic. I meant to say blockbuster, but you get an explosion in a blockbuster movie that's a ways away. A lot of the Middle Eastern, invasion movies did this well, where you'd hear the explosion and then, it's second you see the dust and it's like, whoa, boom, and you're just like, oh shit. And exactly. It's scarier when you see it and don't hear it. There is much more fear to me when I see an explosion and I'm like, there's no sound yet. You're all, oh no. Just like a firework. How many times have you been at 4th of July? And if you know audio, if you're a big audio fan, you go to 4th of July and you see the big explosion, I will usually go like, oh fuck, because I know that thing's gonna rattle my chest. We just go, and that's why I do. I think it's so cool that gamers are. I firmly believe that there are more fans of audio that are going to be able to jump in now than any other thing. Whether graphics are starting to get to the point to where I think I'm not saying good enough, but you're just like, it's accurately represented on screen. Audio is not. There's still a number of people who are not hearing even close to accurate audio.
Yeah.
And I'm excited.
And a lot of people too, they kind of turn down the sound. They have a podcast on the other side, you know. And I always say, if you're struggling to stay concentrated in a game, or if you kind of find it boring, or you find yourself distracted, try kind of shutting everything down, turn up the audio, have, you know, dynamics on and stuff, and kind of like just be engaged with what's being shown to you.
Well, we're multitasking persons, John. Like, that's the problem, Johnny, is everybody, we're all, I'm including myself, where it's like, I'm going to have a TV show. You guys have joked. I've listened to 3 songs at the same time. Many times. And even my wife will be like, what the fuck is, you got Fleetwood Mac and Rob Zombie playing at the same time. What are you doing? I'm like, beating to both of them. I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably, I would never do that during a game, but we are multitaskers. Right. We have a tendency to move room to room. We have our, I don't want to say it out loud, but our Amazon speakers that are right next
restless.
To me. You get restless. But it's like, dude, seriously, give yourself, I swear to God, this is one of the reasons why I was always giving away headphones in our Discord, because I was like, I bet you $1 million that you will quite literally thank me and be like, this, I did not expect this to be such a game changer. And I think Josh is right. Atmos is great, but it's the step from TV to any headset that isn't like $19 and you will be all holy shit. And it's such a cool time, because the amount of data that even games where they don't take a ton of time, but the amount of environmental data, the amount of enemy data, the amount of, dude, Assassin's Creed has different sounds for different enemies, so you can actually tell what armor they're wearing over a hill, like or not over a hill, but in some grass, you can hear like the jingle of, he's got a bow and arrow. You can hear the twang of the bow and arrow, those kind of things. I was playing Dark Tale, the indie game from Focus, and when you fire the bow without an arrow, now most games wouldn't have you pull the bow back. You have no arrows. This one does something that is fucking so ingenious, and I don't know why, because it's not realistic. She just goes ding 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 on the bow, on the empty string. And as an archery hunter, there is something that spoke to me. I was like, oh my God, because sometimes I'll try to pull and I'll be like, I have no arrows. But this time you get instant. You pull that thing, it's like, dun, 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 and I'm like, oh, I've got no arrow. Like, this is fucking
telling
awesome.
you, it's like a clever way of telling you ran out of
no HUD,
arrows.
no need for the HUD. Yeah. And that's another thing I suggest to people. I know nobody believes me, but you haven't played an Assassin's Creed game or a Far Cry game or Ghost of Tsushima until you've tried to play it without the HUD.
No HUD.
Oh, okay.
Your world will
like
explode.
God of War. Did you play that without HUD?
I played it with all. Well, I told you, I played that without HUD, and then fought that guy 45 minutes. Couldn't figure out what was going on, and turned it on and saw that I barely done any damage.
Yeah.
But you have not played a Far Cry or Assassin's Creed game until you've turned off the HUD, and it will. I remember playing Primal and having no HUD on that game, and it was the amount of enjoyment was so many factors above, because they do a very good job. Admittedly, most of the time they do a good job with their storytelling, so you know where to go. And I remember I saw some enemies with unique camo in that game going, that camo's terrible. It's blue and they're in red flowers. And then I went to their spot and it was blue flowers. And I was like, I would never have picked up on that if I wasn't going, why?
Yeah, if you're just following a waypoint.
If I was following a waypoint. And I remember going like, I know exactly where this bridge is, because the character was like, you need to go to a bridge. And I can guarantee you, if I had had the HUD on, I would have looked at a map and been like, where's the HUD? Where's this bridge? And instead he was like, it's the bridge with the center that creaks. And I'm like, fuck, I know exactly where that is. And I think Ghost of Tsushima stepped it up with the wind. I think they came very close. When you use that wind and you're like, oh my God, I don't have to look. Like,
it's great.
It's that moment of like pure joy that you have.
And that's why people liked Elden Ring as well, because it was essentially that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, they pulled out a lot of the UI and they were just like, just figure it out.
And
they respected your intelligence a little bit there.
And the horse. I'm sorry, but the ability to ride away from
easily one of the best additions.
It is, because Dark Souls have always been about, hey, you got to go by this guy, and you're like, fuck, man. Yeah. But on that, you just jump on the horse and ride off and rethink it.
And the ability to jump, and it's just
dude.
like,
it was so. I mean, admittedly, I had a lot of tech issues with that game, and it was one of the first 0-day patches to make a game run considerably worse. Which is a problem we're going to see now as we move forward, where a patch just has an issue and they don't prepare for it. But it considerably, like I had to remove the review or change the review score because it was so bad. But they fixed that. They got that game up and running. And what you've got is a title that, like, a lot of other people are going to look at. And I think that's...
165 bosses, that game.
What?
165 bosses.
The fuck you talking about?
That's still
some of them, admittedly, are...
Elden
used,
Ring?
Of course, yeah. I just watched a challenge run. This guy, challenge run, no hit, every boss in the game. It was 165 splits. So each split would be one enemy, one boss.
What the...
Wow.
Mini boss included.
That's unbelievable. Like, my brain isn't even trying to wrap around
literally
that.
like the scale, right?
160.
You're exploring
some are repeated, yeah. But I mean, ignore the repeated. 165 enemies aren't in some games.
Yeah,
it's
as
insane.
in full enemies. Like, I bet you Vampire probably has less than that. And a great game.
Yeah, it's like the ability to explore that fantasy world is like it's.
Speaking of that, are there any games this year, before we wrap this up, are there any games, Brandon or Josh, that you guys have seen this year that have really impressed you? Oh, Elden Ring. Let's ignore Elden Ring. Because I think we know that.
I'll let Brandon go first.
Oh boy, I'm scrolling through my Steam library to like pick a handful.
What about Forbidden West? Anybody play that but me?
Josh played that, I think.
I played like 2 hours of it, and I just never picked it back up. But there was something about. I know I didn't give it a chance, so I can't really comment on it. But there was something that just immediately struck me like. I feel like I've played this already, but I saw your review on it, and your review actually made me want to play it because you said that once you actually give it a shot.
Dude, I don't do walking the walks that quickly either. I did a walking the walk like less than 2 weeks later because that game does some stuff that is...
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, that game does some stuff technically. I don't know how they did it. Like, I legitimately don't know because they wouldn't answer me. They'll do their GDC, I'm sure. But they did some stuff technically that Guerrilla just is able to do where you're like, man, it reminds me of Insomniac with fucking Spiderman.
The way some of the flying,
damn.
I don't want to specify, but like some of the flying that takes place in the game literally had me like, mouth open.
Yeah, but I get where you're coming from. Did you have any, Brandon?
Let's see. Elden Ring, definitely one of them, but I am looking forward to the Warhammer 40K Dark Tide. I'm really looking forward to that. That's gonna be sweet. I'm looking
nice.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been playing a lot of like Apex Legends lately, so like I always tend to fall back into these little
comfort games almost.
Yeah. Like your League of Legends. Your
I do it with League of Legends too. Yeah, sometimes you just want a hit of that, and that's it.
Man,
there's something too about like I play a lot of Overwatch. I've been playing a lot of Overwatch lately. Is I can whenever I think I start a new single player campaign nowadays, and it's like an open world game. I'm like, this is gonna be an investment. It's like you don't just casually read Game of Thrones, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know that it's going to be like, okay, I have to either go all in or nothing. Like, so I think it's not the fault of Forbidden West or anything. It's just I know that time is a precious resource, and I'm like, is it going to be worth the 40 hours or whatever? So I think The Witcher 3 is one of those games that kind of like destroyed overall games.
Yeah, and I've heard you're not the only one to say that, by the way. You're not the only one to say, like, after that game, not Dark Souls. I think Elden Ring did it for some people, too, where they were like, okay. Yeah. I'll say this. I hope to God I never give the answers you guys just gave. I want to be so challenged for time. I like that. I like to be on the stressy point of, like, dude, I got 37 minutes to sleep. This is awesome. But I get it. I get where you're coming from because you guys have real jobs. Like mine could go away. I react to what you guys do. Like that's pretty. There's very few things in the world that matter less than a video game review, and that's not me being like trying to get. That is truly my belief. Like it doesn't fucking in the long run. It doesn't fucking matter. It's like you guys make the games. I say, I liked it, and hope people agree with me. But man, do I like playing video games. And so to me, when I see Forbidden West, I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll play it twice. Like I get where you're coming from, but man, I hope I never get that way because like, and I don't have I got a wife, but I don't have kids. I got dogs, you know, so I want to piss off a lot of people who have kids and say dogs are just like kids, but I'm not gonna. They're not.
But dogs are better.
But dogs are better.
I'll
More loyal.
I'll piss off everyone.
Yeah. but I get where you're coming from. I get where you're coming from. But my worry comes after I played. I hope this makes sense. You said you worry that it's an investment. You know, is it going to be good? My thought process so far is that I can't wait to fucking tell people if it is good or bad.
Yeah.
And so I want to experience. There is nothing. I don't know how to describe what I feel when I do a walking the walk, but like with Valhalla, when I got done, like the level of engagement I had with that game, a game I did not rate to buy. I rated it a weight, which people get mad at me all the time. They're like, "Why are you doing another video if you rated a weight?" And I'm like, "It doesn't mean it's or it's perfect."
Yeah.
You know, but dude, it is the fucking coolest feeling in the world to look back at a game and remember those experiences. So right now, my desire to do that is higher. I have not yet looked at a game and been like, that's going to be a lot. But I also don't work in games. There's a difference, man. I react. You're creating something. And so you're not the only ones to say that. Now, Victor, I talk to Victor all the time. He's done, this would be his 4th podcast last week, where he came on from Fat Shark. We, admittedly, I'm surprised he's come on 4 times because the first time I met him, I told him how bad his game was. And I was like, I didn't realize he was the one who made it. But he's such a great guy, right? Escape from Dead Island, by the way. No one play it. It's fucking terrible. But we were talking, and he's the same way because he's creating. And he's in the whatever of it. And I think that that's the difference right now is that I get to react. I get surprised from you guys. So when you guys do Borderlands, I get surprised, and whether that's positive or negative, it's a different whatever. I get surprised by it. I think sometimes you guys are building them too, so you know a little bit more of the
you know how the sauce is made a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Which I guess, but on the other hand, I teach martial arts and I do. I don't know. It's a different thing, but I get where you're coming from. You're not the only guys to be like a little bit more of a comfort thing as developers. I think a lot do. I also have talked to developers who are very nervous about playing a game and trying to change their own. A lot of developers will mention that. They'll be like, I don't necessarily want to. Surge, Adam Hatani did the Surge, and we were talking to him, which is basically Dark Souls. And they sort of stepped away from playing other games. They played them prior, but once they got into their thing, they were like, you don't want all this other input because it's very easy to go, we need to do this. By the way, Cliff Baczynski stated very clearly that was one of the issues with his last 2 games, is he was looking at all these other games and was like, grab.
Making like the Frankenstein game.
Yeah,
right?
and you get the and you don't have. You even said it earlier. You were like, will Game Pass cause people to cut the extraneous bullshit and be a little bit more on some games, which is going to be a positive for a lot of games, might be a negative for others. But I get where you guys are coming from. I get it. I do hold it personally against Josh for not playing Forbidden West. I'm just gonna say that. But,
I still have it on my PS5, so I'll probably have to get back to it.
Do we have anything else before we wrap this up? Anything important?
I think that's about it. Just wanted to say huge honor for me to chat with you guys.
It's a huge honor for us too.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah,
you know, like Borderlands was literally the first like co-op multiplayer experience that I had in university, and that built my love for co-op with friends.
Yeah, because he won't shut up about Borderlands.
I won't shut up.
Him and Absy are. I mean, I'm not saying I like Borderlands, but those guys are like at a different level. They probably know stats for shit that I.
So, yeah.
Like it's crazy to see. It's awesome also that you guys take the time, because I know big companies can be a little, harder on interviews and stuff, and I know that I'm not always politically correct in my cussing, but I definitely appreciate you guys taking the time and them being cool with it, because I do think that things can get a little too organized at times, and you'll see people, same questions come up, blah blah blah, and it's like sometimes it's cool to just be like, what do you not like? And what do you like? And I know we talk about, we're certainly not going to hammer on games, but the ability to say, I don't like it because of this, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people are very afraid of it now. And there's really nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't, in fact, if you're just saying good stuff, you're not, that's almost worse. It's like, like even you joke, saying Forbidden West, something felt off right at the starting. It's like, that's a legitimate complaint that should be discussed, even if I worked past it. It's like, that doesn't matter. And I think a lot of companies are a tiny bit nervous about that right now. And it's
I will say this,
should be more
the thing that actually kind of like started, I guess, triggering me a little bit in Forbidden West was, and I actually know you can turn this feature off, but there are all these berries that you can pick up.
Where you have to like stop.
Yeah. You see the animation every time.
Thank you, KARAK. I win. KARAK and I had a passionate discussion. I was in favor of this feature. KARAK,
you turn it off and you can just pick them up, and you don't see it. You don't see the animation anymore.
You don't need to, because you pick up.
You don't need to.
20,000 arrows.
Right, but it's still an anime. Oh man, I hate this discussion, because every time I'm the only one who wants to watch it. And I thought Josh was going to mention that she talks too much, which is what everybody else has been saying.
There was a little bit of that.
Too. Yeah. Dude, that's a big hot point for Aloy right now, is that she tells you what to do, which is a bad idea. And you guys are all right. I think it's great there's an option. I don't think it's great. I almost lied.
It really depends on also how you play. Because if you're like me and you're OCD, you're picking up every single goddamn thing.
What's wrong?
I do the same thing.
Then pick them up.
It slows my roll, KARAK. I don't need the. Listen.
That's why I love the take all button in any like RPG. It's just like yoink everything out of the drawer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, Borderlands, they added that at some point earlier.
Well, and you have the filter for purples, don't you? Don't you have like the filter where you can choose only to pick up certain colors?
Oh, I meant like that you just hold E and you pick up everything in the scene.
Oh, gotcha.
And you don't even have to do that anymore. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, just automatically
removing the game from the game.
You're just you have like all this gravity
vacuum
picking up everything, a black hole for loot,
sucking up everything. But yeah, so these guys, a huge thanks to them for coming on. Check out their stuff. Borderlands, you got I don't know when this will be announced. I'm assuming there's going to be another like full Borderlands 4 at some point. You guys haven't said anything, right? We haven't.
Nope.
No, nothing about.
No,
so
we're never doing another one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Well, Josh didn't smile when I said right, so who knows? But regardless of what happens, awesome games that it seems like everybody absolutely enjoys. Honestly, really, really cool co-op shooters, but even cooler just that they come on and talk about audio, which is just, it's rare that you get people who want to talk about audio or who can for long periods of time. We got Austin Wintry who's come on. These guys have come on. We got Justin Bell, all these people that you guys should celebrate by going and checking out their stuff, because again, 90% of the game is not visual. I'm sorry. It's okay, mate. I'll change that. 70% of the game is not 50%. Okay, I'm changing my score. 50% of the game is visual, 50 is audio, and if you are not paying attention to the audio, I implore you, just one time, put your friggin' headset on and play and see what these guys have done, because it's fucking awesome.
We appreciate you having a voice and being an advocate for us. It's a really big deal to us too. So
yeah, I always will be, even if you ignore the pickup animation. So weird though. It must be a real thing, because they mentioned it after we mentioned it just so it's obviously it's on people's people's radar.
By the way, quick shout out to Kepler North, which is Joshua Davidson's music on Spotify. You can look that up if you're interested in checking it out.
Thank you.
As he's like, thank you. Now I'm going to have people responding to it. And are you cool with, do you look at your reviews on stuff like that? Or are you more of a, I release it, I'm done?
No, I do. It's important to get feedback. So
okay. All right. Me, by the way, I'm going to turn comments off. I don't want your fucking feedback. So I'm just joking. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't, because I'm going to continue to make it whether you like it or not. I appreciate these guys showing up. Johnny, as always, it's been a pleasure. Johnny's always cool to come on to these kind of things, knows what he's talking about. The other guys did too, but I didn't want to get it, you know, unwieldy when it comes to podcast size. So that's it for us, everybody. Check out the reviews. You'll be seeing a review, NDA. You'll see some reviews from me, but I can't even say the titles now that I think about it. So anyway, that'll be it for us. Thank you, everybody, and peace out.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.